At my son's high school graduation, my parents announced they were taking his college fund and giving it to my nephew, Larry, instead. My husband, Mark, just laughed and said, "That's funny because we moved it last month." My parents went crazy when they realized it was true. We were at a nice steakhouse for Ethan's graduation dinner. Ethan had worked so hard and got into his dream college. This dinner was meant to celebrate his achievements, but my parents ruined it. Right after we got our drinks, my mom tapped her glass to get everyone's attention and proudly announced, "We've decided Ethan's college fund will go to his cousin Larry instead. He needs it more." Everything went silent. I was shocked, and Ethan looked devastated. My dad nodded like it was perfectly fine, saying, "It's best for the family. Larry's been having a hard time, and this will help him get back on track." Larry was my brother's son, and my parents had always favored him over my kids. They kept helping him even when he messed up over and over again. Mark spoke up before I could. He calmly said, "That's funny because we moved the college fund last month." My parents were stunned. My mom's smile disappeared. "What?" she snapped. Mark explained, "We knew something like this would happen, so we moved Ethan's money where you couldn't touch it." Then they exploded. My mom turned red and started yelling, "You had no right." My dad slammed his hand on the table, shouting, "That money was meant for family." I finally spoke up, "Ethan is family, and that fund was his. You had no right to try and take it." My mom angrily said, "Larry needs this. Your brother is struggling as a single dad, and you're ruining everything." I realized then that my parents never intended for that money to go to Ethan. They had always planned to give it to Larry. Ethan was hurt and angry. He stood up and said, "I don't need anything from you. I don't need your money, and I definitely don't need you in my life." Mark stood up too, guiding Ethan away. "Let's go. We don't owe them another second of our time." I stood and looked at my parents. "You've shown us who you are, and now we'll never forget it." As we walked away, my parents screamed that we were ungrateful and tearing the family apart, but I knew we had made the right decision. I didn't realize how far my parents would go to try and get that money back. First, they bombarded us with angry calls and voicemails. My dad left threatening messages saying, "You'll regret this." My brother sent me a text saying, "You're being selfish. Larry needs the money more than Ethan." I didn't even reply. Then the real trouble started. About a week later, Mark got a call from the bank. I heard him say, "What withdrawal?" and my stomach dropped. When he hung up, he looked furious. They tried to access Ethan's fund. They called the bank, pretending to be us, and claimed there was a family emergency. I was shaking. Did they get the money? Mark shook his head. "No, the bank caught on that something was wrong and called me to confirm." I called my dad immediately, my voice trembling with anger. "You actually tried to steal from us? What's wrong with you?" He didn't even sound guilty. "You left us no choice. You're being unreasonable." "Unreasonable? You tried to commit fraud," I yelled. "It's our money," my dad snapped. 3 days later, we got our answer. When I got home, I saw a big envelope on our doorstep. It was from a lawyer. My hands were shaking as I opened it and went inside. Mark was in the living room. "What's that?" he asked. "They're suing us," I whispered. Mark's head snapped up. "What?" "They're saying they helped fund Ethan's college savings, and we moved the money without their permission. They're claiming they own part of it." Mark grabbed the papers from me, his eyes narrowing as he read. "This is complete nonsense," he muttered, but I was scared. My parents were good at lying and twisting things to make themselves look like the victims, and in court, that could be dangerous. We spent days gathering all our documents, bank statements, deposit records, everything. Then, my parents pulled a sneaky move. At the next lawyer meeting, they showed a receipt from over 10 years ago. They had made a one-time deposit of $2,000 into Ethan's college fund when he was a baby. They sat there, smug, while their lawyer argued that since they had contributed even a little, they had the right to fight us for the money. $2,000? I almost laughed. "You think that gives you control over the entire fund?" My mom just smiled and said, "It was a contribution. Without it, you wouldn't have saved as much as you did." I was furious, but Mark kept his cool. "So, just because you gave a one-time gift years ago, you think you get to decide where all the money goes?" My dad nodded. "Exactly." I felt like screaming. Weeks later, the court made a decision. They ruled that my parents had no control over the fund, but we had to pay them back their $2,000, with interest. It was a small win since they couldn't touch the rest of the money, but it still felt like a loss. My parents were showing me just how far they were willing to go to hurt us for standing up to them, and they weren't done yet. Not even 2 weeks after the court ruling, Mark walked into the house looking pale. They reported us, he said. Reported us? To the IRS? I asked. They're accusing us of tax fraud. I stared at him. Are you serious? They told the IRS we've been hiding money and misreporting our finances for years. I gripped the counter. This is insane. Mark nodded, his face grim. Yeah, and now we're under investigation. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about the money anymore. My parents were trying to destroy us, and if they wanted a fight, I was ready to give them one. I thought the lawsuit was the worst thing they could do. I thought having to give back a chunk of money to my greedy, selfish parents was the end of it, but I was wrong. When the IRS showed up at our door, that's when I realized my parents weren't just after the money, they were trying to ruin us completely. I quickly looked over the letter, my hands shaking. This can't be real, I whispered. It's real, Mark said quietly. Then came the phone call. An IRS agent politely explained that someone had reported us for hiding money and doing illegal transfers. We knew who did it, but proving it was another story. For the next few weeks, we drowned in paperwork, tax records, bank statements, anything we could find to prove we were innocent. Thankfully, our finances were clean, but the investigation was still a huge hassle. The worst part? It affected Ethan's financial aid. His college froze his scholarship while they looked into the IRS review. My parents weren't just after the money, they were trying to ruin his future too. That was my breaking point. If they wanted a fight, I was ready to give them one. I started digging. I knew my parents had secrets. They were experts at lying and twisting the truth. If they wanted to play dirty, I would too. It didn't take long to find something. Years ago, Mark had helped them set up a rental property, handling all the paperwork, but they'd been hiding the rental income for years. They thought they were untouchable, but they'd messed up. I made a call. I didn't report them yet, but I let my mom know what I'd found. I called her, and she answered, smug as always. Oh, so you're ready to apologize? I almost laughed. No, I'm calling to tell you I found the real tax fraud in this family. There was silence, then she scoffed. What are you talking about? Your rental income, the money you didn't report for the last 15 years. She sounded shocked. You have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, I do, I said coldly, and so does the IRS, unless you drop this and stop with the threats. Her tone changed. You wouldn't. I smiled. Try me. She hung up without another word. 2 days later, we got a call from the IRS. Our case was suddenly no longer a priority. A week later, Ethan's college funds were unfrozen. They had backed off, for now, but I knew they wouldn't stop, and I was right. Late one night, we were asleep when we heard glass shatter. I thought I was dreaming, but then I heard footsteps in the house. Mark grabbed the baseball bat by the bed and told me to call 911. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped my phone. Then we heard a voice. Mom? Dad? Ethan? Panic hit me. Ethan had heard the noise and was coming downstairs. Stay in your room, Mark shouted. Too late. Ethan came into the hallway just as we did, and that's when we saw him, Larry, standing in the living room, drunk, with a crowbar in his hands. No one moved for a second, then Larry stepped forward. Where is it? He slurred. Mark gripped the bat tighter. Where's what? The money, Larry shouted. I deserve it. They promised it to me. I realized then, my parents had sent him. They couldn't take the money themselves, so they sent their grandson. Larry stumbled toward us with the crowbar raised. You think you can just take what's mine? Ethan stepped forward, fists clenched. It was never yours, he said firmly. Now get out. Larry laughed, bitter and broken. Oh, yeah? What are you going to do about it? That's when Mark swung the bat, not at Larry, but at the wall next to him. The loud crash snapped Larry out of his drunken state. He backed up, eyes wide, and without saying another word, he ran out the door. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They arrested Larry for attempted burglary. My parents bailed him out before sunrise. Then my mom called. You've gone too far, she hissed. You had him arrested. I almost laughed. He broke into our home with a weapon. That's on you. There was a long silence. Then she whispered, you'll regret this. For the first time, I truly believed she meant it. This wasn't over. 2 weeks after the break-in, my brother called. He wanted to meet. It's gone too far, he said tiredly. Mom and Dad are a mess. Larry's a mess. We need to talk. I almost laughed. Now he wanted to talk? After letting our parents use him like a pawn? But Mark convinced me. Maybe this is our chance to end it, he said, to get some answers. So, we agreed to meet. The family meeting was set for Sunday at my parents' house. Walking in felt like walking into a war zone. Mark and I arrived first. Ethan refused to come. I'm done with them, he said, and I didn't blame him. I looked at my parents. They sat stiffly on the couch, looking angry. My mom's face was tight, and my dad wouldn't even look at us. Then my brother walked in with Larry. My whole body tensed. Larry looked terrible, thin, with dark circles under his eyes. His usual smug attitude was gone, replaced by something fragile. My mom gestured for us to sit, but I stayed standing. Let's just get this over with, I said. My brother sighed. Look, we all messed up. Mark scoffed. We messed up? I didn't mean it like that, my brother said quickly. I mean, this isn't what Mom and Dad wanted. I laughed bitterly. They wanted to steal from my son. They used Larry to break into our house. So, tell me, what exactly did they not want? Larry spoke then. His voice was rough. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, he mumbled. I thought it was mine. His words made me sick. You thought it was yours? Why? He swallowed hard and glanced at my mom. I saw the guilt on her face. She wouldn't look at me. Mark noticed too. He leaned forward, his voice calm but dangerous. Tell us, Larry, why did you think it was yours? Larry hesitated, looking nervously at my mom, and then it hit me. Oh my God, I whispered. You told him, didn't you? My mom flinched. I turned to Larry, my heart pounding. They told you it was already yours, didn't they? That Ethan's money was yours all along? Larry's eyes darted around, his face pale. My mom spoke before he could. We had to, she snapped. He was struggling. Your brother was struggling. We had to give him hope. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, you lied to him? You told him his future was safe with money that was never his? My dad finally spoke, his voice sharp. What does it matter? You and Mark have good jobs, a house, a stable life. Larry had nothing. What kind of sister are you to just watch while your nephew struggled? That was it. Something snapped inside me. I took a step forward, my hands shaking with anger. What kind of parents are you? I hissed. You have 2 kids, but you always treated me like I didn't matter. You gave everything to him. I pointed at my brother, who shrank away from me. And now you expect me to just give away my son's future because of your guilt. My mom jumped to her feet. We did what we had to do. No, I snapped. You did what you always do. You chose my brother over me, and this time, you got caught. Silence filled the room. Larry shook his head, his face crumbling. You lied to me, he whispered, looking at my mom like he was seeing her for the first time. Larry, she started, reaching for him, but he pulled away. No, 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 you promised me, he whispered, his breathing shaky. You swore I wouldn't have to worry about college, that I was set. He looked at my dad. And you knew. My dad's silence said everything. Larry let out a shaky laugh. Then he turned to me. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. And for the first time, I saw the truth. He finally understood he had been used just like we had been hurt. He turned and walked out. I didn't stop him. My parents tried to make excuses. They shouted, they ranted, they said I was overreacting, that I was tearing the family apart. I just said, we're done. And this time, I meant it. My brother tried once to reach out after that day. He apologized, admitted he had let things go too far, and that he had trusted our parents too much, but I wasn't ready to forgive. Larry, surprisingly, stayed out of trouble. He got a job, took classes at a community college. Whether it was guilt, shame, or a real wake-up call, I'll never know, but I hoped, for his sake, he had finally learned. As for Ethan, he went to college, the college he earned. My parents never got a cent of that money, and they never saw us again. Cutting off your parents, even when they never truly loved you the way they should have, feels like mourning the dead, but sometimes, it's better to bury the past than let it keep hurting you, and I chose to live. The end.
The rain pelted my face as I stood frozen, staring at the crumpled papers in my trembling hands. My entire world had just imploded in the span of 15 minutes. Right after we buried Mom. I'm Callie, and until today, I thought I knew exactly who I was. Daughter of Sylvia Mackenzie, owner of Sweet Dreams Bakery, and someone who had just lost the most important person in her life to cancer. Now, according to my stepmother Linda, I was nobody. Your adoption papers were fake, she'd said, her voice as cold as the November wind whipping around us. You have no legal claim to anything. Here's your suitcase. I've packed what belongs to you. She'd dropped a small-wheeled suitcase at my feet, right there in the cemetery parking lot. That's impossible, I'd stammered, rain soaking through my black dress. Mom adopted me when I was 3. I have memories, photos, documents. Fabricated. Linda's perfectly made-up face hadn't shown an ounce of emotion. Your mother was desperate for a child. She cut corners, made arrangements that weren't exactly legal. She'd pulled out a folder, showing me papers I'd never seen before. These are the real documents. As her widow, everything belongs to me now. I couldn't process what was happening. But the bakery? Mom wanted me to have it. She told me, the bakery, the house, her savings, they're all mine now. Linda had smiled then, a small, cruel twist of her lips. You should be grateful I'm letting you take your clothes. Now, standing alone in the rain, I clutched Mom's last letter in my hand. She'd given it to Jake, my bakery assistant, 2 days before she died, making him promise to deliver it after the funeral. He'd slipped it to me right after Linda's bombshell. My phone buzzed. Jake's name lit up the screen. Callie, where are you? You shouldn't be alone right now. I'm still at the cemetery. My voice cracked. Jake, she's trying to take everything. The bakery, my home. Don't move. I'm coming to get you. 10 minutes later, Jake's beaten-up Corolla pulled up. He jumped out, umbrella in hand, and rushed to my side. Jesus, you're soaked. Get in the car. Once inside, I finally opened Mom's letter with shaking fingers. Jake turned up the heat and waited silently as I read. Dear Callie, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and Linda has probably already shown her true colors. What she told you about your adoption isn't the whole truth. She's been planning this for years, ever since she married your father and discovered she couldn't have children of her own. The adoption was legal, sweetheart. Every document was real. But Linda, she's been systematically destroying and replacing papers since your father died. I discovered what she was doing too late, when the cancer was already spreading. But I left you something she doesn't know about. Remember the old recipe box? The one with the false bottom? Everything you need is there, and there's something else. Something about Linda that could destroy everything she's built. I'm so sorry I won't be there to help you fight this, but you're stronger than you know. All my love, Mom. Jake whistled low. The recipe box, it's still at the bakery, right? I nodded, my mind racing. Linda doesn't know about it. Mom never told anyone except me. We need to get there before she does. Jake started the car. The bakery keys are still in your pocket? I patted my dress, panic rising. They're in my purse, which is in the suitcase she gave me. We drove to the cemetery parking lot where Linda had left the suitcase. As I reached for it, Jake grabbed my arm. Wait, he said, voice tense. Look. Linda's sleek black Mercedes was pulling into the lot. She stepped out, phone to her ear. Yes, I'm handling it now. The bakery keys, the documents, everything. No, she won't be a problem, Chaz. I've made sure of that. I ducked down in Jake's car, heart pounding. Linda walked to her trunk and pulled out several boxes labeled Sweet Dreams Bakery. She's already started, I whispered. She's taking everything. Jake's jaw tightened. Not everything, not yet. He started the engine. We're going to get your recipe box, and then we're going to find out exactly what your mom knew about Linda. As we drove away, I clutched Mom's letter to my chest. Linda thought she'd stripped away my identity, my inheritance, my whole life. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She didn't know about Mom's last gift to me, and I was going to use it to take back everything that was rightfully mine. Jake, I said, my voice steady for the first time since the funeral, I need you to help me destroy her. He glanced at me, then back at the road. I'm in, but Callie, there's something you should know about Linda, something that might help us. I turned to him, rain still dripping from my hair. What? She ruined my family too, and I've been waiting years for a chance to make her pay. Jake parked behind Sweet Dreams Bakery, killing the headlights. The rain had finally stopped, but darkness was settling in fast. Through the back window, I could see Linda's Mercedes wasn't in the lot. Yet, what did you mean about Linda ruining your family? I asked, but Jake was already out of the car, testing the back door. Later, we need to move fast. He pulled out a ring of keys. I still have my set from closing last night. Inside, the familiar scent of vanilla and cinnamon wrapped around me like a hug. The kitchen where Mom had taught me everything she knew, where I'd grown from a clumsy kid to head baker, was still warm from the day's work. The recipe box is in Mom's office, I said, heading for the small room behind the kitchen. Jake, watch the front. I found the old wooden box right where it had always been, tucked behind Mom's ancient desktop computer. My hands trembled as I pressed the hidden catch on the bottom, just like Mom had shown me years ago. The false bottom popped open. Callie, Jake's urgent whisper carried from the front. Car pulling up. I grabbed everything from the hidden compartment, a USB drive, a thick envelope, and what looked like a journal, and shoved it all in my jacket pocket. The recipe box went back exactly as I'd found it. Footsteps clicked on the sidewalk outside. Back door, Jake mouthed, gesturing urgently. We slipped out just as the front door chimed. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Linda and a man in an expensive suit entering the bakery. That's Chaz, Jake whispered as we crouched behind his car. The lawyer she was talking to earlier. My phone buzzed. Samantha, my best friend since kindergarten. I'd texted her earlier about Linda's bombshell. My place, I whispered to Jake. Sam's a paralegal. She can help us make sense of whatever Mom left. 20 minutes later, we were in Samantha's apartment. She took one look at my still damp funeral dress and disappeared into her bedroom, returning with sweats and a hoodie. Change, she ordered. Then we'll talk. When I emerged, Jake and Sam had coffee waiting. I pulled out everything from the hidden compartment. Start with the USB, Sam suggested, already booting up her laptop. The drive contained dozens of photos and documents. Sam clicked through them rapidly, her professional demeanor cracking as she realized what she was seeing. These are email exchanges between Linda and Chaz, she said, dating back 5 years, before your mom got sick. They were planning this, Callie. Look. The emails detailed everything. How Linda had discovered she couldn't have children. How she'd manipulated my father into changing his will, making her the primary beneficiary. How she'd systematically altered my adoption records after he died. Wait, Jake said suddenly, pointing at the screen. Go back one. Sam clicked backward. There was Linda's email address, and next to it, a name that made Jake go pale. That's my brother's email, he said quietly. Calvin. Your brother works with Linda? I asked. Jake ran a hand through his hair. Worked. Past tense. He was her personal assistant until 3 years ago, when she accused him of embezzlement. He lost everything, his reputation, his savings. He had to move across the country to start over. But he didn't do it, Sam said, reading further. According to these emails, Linda set him up. She needed someone to take the fall for money she was moving around. That's why you took the job at the bakery, I realized. You were trying to get close to Linda. Jake nodded. I needed proof she framed Calvin, but I never found anything concrete. Well, now we have it. Sam was still scrolling. And that's not all. Callie, you need to see this. She opened the journal, Mom's diary. The last entry was dated just days before she died. Linda came today, thinking I was too weak to understand what she was saying. She admitted everything. How she's been planning to take the bakery since she married Richard. How she destroyed the original adoption papers. She thinks she's won. But she doesn't know I've been recording our conversations. The tapes are with everything else. Use them wisely, my dear girl. And remember, the biggest secret isn't about the bakery at all. It's about who Linda really is and what she did 29 years ago. The entry ended there. The tapes must be in this envelope, I said, reaching for it. Before I could open it, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know you were at the bakery tonight. Meet me tomorrow at noon at Carter's Cafe. Come alone, or I start the paperwork to seize the bakery immediately. Linda. Don't go, Jake said immediately. It's a trap. No, Sam countered, her eyes gleaming. Go, but not alone. We'll be there too, recording everything. And Callie? She held up the envelope. Let's listen to these tapes first. Tomorrow you're going in armed with everything we know. I looked at the text again, anger and determination coursing through me. Linda thinks she's calling the shots, but Mom made sure I'd be ready for this fight. And you're not fighting alone, Jake added quietly. For the first time since the funeral, I felt a spark of hope. Linda had no idea what was coming. Carter's Cafe was packed for the lunch rush when I walked in at exactly noon. Linda sat at a corner table, perfectly poised in her designer suit, a untouched cappuccino in front of her. Right on time, she said as I sat down. I assume you've had time to process our conversation from yesterday. Sam and Jake were at separate tables, looking like any other customers. Sam's phone was recording everything, while Jake nursed a coffee near the emergency exit. Process? I kept my voice steady. You mean how you waited until my mother was buried to tell me my whole life is a lie? Linda's smile didn't reach her eyes. Dramatic as always, Callie. I'm offering you a deal. A deal? The coffee cup rattled slightly as I set it down. After you tried to steal my identity? Lower your voice, she hissed, glancing around. Listen carefully. I'll give you $50,000, cash, to walk away quietly. Start fresh somewhere else. That's more than generous. I leaned forward. And what about the tapes? Linda's perfectly manicured hand froze halfway to her cup. What tapes? The ones where you admitted to manipulating Dad's will. The ones where you told Mom exactly how you planned to take everything from me. The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. You're bluffing. Want to bet? I pulled out my phone and played a short clip. Linda's voice crystal clear. Once Sylvia's gone, I'll make sure that little charity case never sees a penny of what's rightfully mine. Linda's eyes darted to the exits. Where did you get that? Mom was smarter than you gave her credit for. I stopped the recording. She knew what you were planning. She left evidence. Evidence of what exactly? A new voice cut in. Chaz, Linda's lawyer, slid into the seat next to her. Because making illegal recordings could be problematic for you, Callie. I hadn't expected him. From the corner of my eye, I saw Jake tense. Not as problematic as fraud, I countered, or destroying legal documents, or embezzlement. Right, Linda. Should we ask Calvin about that? Linda's cup clattered against the saucer. How do you know about Calvin? I finished. I know everything, including what happened 29 years ago. It was a bluff. We hadn't decoded that part of Mom's message yet. But Linda's reaction told me it hit home. She gripped the table edge, knuckles white. You're lying, she whispered. Try me. I stood up. Here's my deal. Return everything you stole, the bakery, the house, my inheritance, or I take this all public, every last detail. Chaz grabbed my arm. Sit down. You're making a mistake. Take your hand off her. Jake was suddenly there, his voice low and dangerous. Now. Well, Linda recovered enough to smirk. If it isn't Calvin's little brother, still trying to clear his name? The evidence already did that, Jake said. Your emails to Chaz spelled it out pretty clearly. Linda's smirk faltered. Chaz released my arm. This isn't over, Linda stood, gathering her things. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Actually, I do. I held up my phone. By the way, there's something else you should know. The annual charity gala next week, I'll be there. Rylan Howard personally invited me to speak about Mom's contributions to the community. Linda froze. Rylan Howard was her biggest social connection, the key to her carefully cultivated high society image. You wouldn't dare, she breathed. Try me. You have until then to make this right. As Linda and Chaz hurried out, Sam slid into their vacant seats. Got it all on video. But Callie, that thing about speaking at the gala was a lie, I finished. But it gave me an idea. Rylan Howard hosts that gala every year. Mom always donated pastries. They loved her. And Linda desperately wants to be part of that crowd, Jake added. It's her whole identity. Exactly. I pulled out Mom's journal. We have 6 days to figure out what happened 29 years ago. Whatever it is, Linda's terrified of it coming out. I'll call Rylan's office, Sam said, already dialing. I handle some of her charity's legal work. I can get you that speaking slot. Jake touched my shoulder. Callie, when Linda mentioned Calvin, I should tell you something. There's more to this than just the embezzlement setup. Before he could continue, my phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. I know what Linda did 29 years ago. Meet me at the old library tonight at 8. Come alone. This changes everything. I showed Jake and Sam the message. It's probably Linda trying to trap you, Sam warned. Or it could be someone who actually knows, Jake said. But you're not going alone. I stared at the message, thinking of Mom's last words in her journal. Whatever Linda's secret was, it was big enough to make her lose control at just the mention of it. I'm going, I decided. But first, we need to stop by the bakery. There's something in Mom's office I need to check. What? Sam asked. The dates in her old calendars. 29 years ago, Mom was working at the children's hospital. Whatever happened, it happened there. Jake's expression changed. The children's hospital? Callie. That's where Calvin used to work, too. The old library loomed dark and imposing as I approached, its Gothic architecture casting long shadows in the streetlight. Jake and Sam were parked around the corner, watching through their phone's video chat. Still no sign of anyone. Jake's voice crackled through my earpiece. Be careful. I climbed the stone steps, remembering what we'd discovered at the bakery earlier. Mom's old calendar had shown multiple appointments at the children's hospital in the months before my adoption. The same hospital where Calvin had worked in the records department before Linda destroyed his career. A figure emerged from behind a pillar. Not Linda. A man in his late 30s wearing a worn leather jacket. Calvin? I recognized him from the photo Jake had shown me. He nodded, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Thanks for coming. I've been following your situation with Linda. How? I never stopped watching her, even after she framed me. I was at the funeral, stayed in the back, saw how she treated you. Why contact me now? Calvin pulled out a thick manila envelope. Because I finally found proof of what she did. Not just to me, but 29 years ago. It involves you, Callie, and your real mother. My heart stopped. What? Suddenly, headlights swept across the library steps. A black SUV screeched to a halt. Inside, now! Calvin grabbed my arm, pulling me through the library's side entrance. He had a key, must have gotten it earlier. Jake, Sam, black SUV just showed up. I whispered into my earpiece. We see it. Sam replied. 2 men getting out. Looks like Chaz is one of them. Calvin led me through the darkened library, past towering shelves to a back office. Linda's been paying people to destroy records for years, he said, locking the door behind us. But I managed to save copies before she got to them. He spread documents across a desk, clicking on a small lamp. Look at this, hospital records from 29 years ago. Linda was a nurse there. A nurse? That was news to me. In the maternity ward, there was an incident, a baby swap. 2 infants switched at birth. One died a few days later. Calvin's voice was grim. The hospital covered it up, but Linda was responsible. She'd been drinking on shift. My hands shook as I read the documents. Are you saying the baby that died wasn't supposed to be with those parents? Linda switched the infant's ID bracelets. She was about to be caught when your mother, your birth mother, went into early labor. Linda saw an opportunity. Heavy footsteps echoed through the library. They're inside, Jake warned through the earpiece. We're coming in. Linda helped deliver you, Calvin continued quickly. When your birth mother developed complications and died shortly after, Linda falsified the death certificate. She reported you as the deceased infant, then arranged for Sylvia to adopt you through unofficial channels. But why? My voice cracked. Because the baby swap investigation would have revealed her drinking problem. She'd have lost her nursing license, gone to jail. This way, she buried her mistake forever. Or so she thought. The office door rattled violently. Open up, Chaz's voice boomed. Calvin, we know you're in there. Take these, Calvin shoved the envelope at me. There's a back door through that storage room. Go. What about you? I'll hold them off. Jake knows where to find me. Go. I slipped into the storage room just as the office door burst open. Through the crack, I saw Chaz and another man confronting Calvin. Those records were sealed, Chaz snarled. Like the records you helped Linda falsify? Calvin shot back. I heard scuffling, then Jake's voice. Police are on their way. Back off. I clutched the envelope and ran, bursting out the back door into the night air. Sam was waiting in her car. Drive! I jumped in. As we sped away, I saw Jake helping Calvin out of the building in my side mirror. They made it to Jake's car just as police sirens wailed in the distance. What did you find out? Sam asked. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers, pulling out birth certificates, death records, and hospital documents. Linda's been running from her past for 29 years. She killed a baby through negligence, then used my birth to cover it up. My voice broke. She stole me from my dying mother and arranged the adoption to hide her crimes. Sam's grip tightened on the steering wheel. That's why she was so desperate to discredit your adoption. If anyone looked too closely at the original records, they'd uncover everything. I stared at the proof in my hands. Mom must have figured it out before she died. That's why she left me the evidence. My phone buzzed. Jake, Calvin's safe, meeting at Sam's place in 20. You need to see what else he has. Another text followed immediately, this one from Linda. Whatever Calvin told you is lies. Last chance, Callie. Walk away, or I'll make sure you lose everything, including your precious bakery. I'm filing the paperwork tomorrow. I thought of Mom, fighting cancer, but still fighting for me. Of my birth mother, who never got to know me. Of Calvin carrying this truth for years. Sam, I said, my voice steel hard, call Rylan. Tell her I need that speaking slot at the gala. It's time everyone knew exactly who Linda really is. The gala's tomorrow night, Sam said, pacing her living room. Linda's already trying to block your speaking slot. She told Rylan you're mentally unstable. I was rehearsing my speech when someone knocked. Jake opened the door to reveal Calvin, looking more composed than he had at the library. Linda's getting desperate, he said, dropping a new stack of papers on the coffee table. She just tried to access my old hospital records again. Too late, Jake smiled grimly. We already moved everything to a secure server. Calvin spread out the new documents. There's more. Remember how I said Linda had been drinking when she switched those babies? She was drinking with someone. He pointed to an old staff photo. My heart stopped. Is that Chaz? Calvin confirmed. He was a junior lawyer for the hospital back then. He helped cover up the baby swap, and Linda's been blackmailing him ever since. That's why he's helping her now, Sam realized. She's still holding it over him. My phone buzzed. An email from Rylan Howard herself. Speaking slot confirmed for tomorrow night. Linda tried to intervene, but I've known Sylvia for years. If you have something to say, you'll be heard. We need to be careful, Calvin warned. Linda's not just worried about her reputation anymore. She's facing potential criminal charges. Which is why this has to be perfect, Sam said, pulling up a presentation on her laptop. I've organized all the evidence. Hospital records, death certificates, the recordings from Sylvia, Calvin's testimony. Wait, Jake interrupted, staring at one of the documents. That date? Calvin, isn't that when you first confronted Linda about the records? Calvin nodded. 3 days later, she accused me of embezzlement. And the day after that, Jake continued, she married Callie's father. I grabbed the timeline Sam had created. She married Dad right after Calvin threatened to expose her. She needed his connections, his reputation, and his daughter, Calvin finished. Having you close meant she could control the narrative if anything came out about your adoption. A text lit up my phone. The bakery paperwork is filed. You have 24 hours to vacate. Linda. She's trying to force our hand, Sam said. No, I stood up, anger and determination flowing through me. She's scared. The gala isn't just her social circle, it's her shield. All those influential people thinking she's this grieving widow, this pillar of the community. Once they know the truth, Jake started. She'll lose everything, Calvin finished, just like she made me lose everything. I picked up my speech notes. Sam, can you get the police records from the original baby swap investigation? Already on it. But Callie? She hesitated. Are you sure you want to do this publicly? It's going to be intense. Mom wanted the truth to come out, I said firmly. Not just for me, but for that other family who lost their baby. They never knew what really happened. Jake's phone chimed. Linda's just posted on social media about speaking at the gala, too. She's announcing a new charitable foundation in Sylvia's name. Using Mom's name to rehabilitate her image, I felt sick. After everything she did, use it, Calvin said suddenly. Let her think she's winning. When she's up there playing the grieving widow. That's when we strike, Sam finished, eyes gleaming. Rylan scheduled you to speak right after Linda. I looked around at my unlikely team. Sam with her legal expertise, Jake with his unwavering support, Calvin with his years of gathered evidence. Mom had made sure I wouldn't fight this battle alone. There's one more thing. Calvin pulled out a faded envelope. I found your birth mother's last letter. She wrote it knowing she wouldn't survive the complications. It was supposed to go to you, but Linda intercepted it. My hands trembled as I took it. I can't read this yet. After the gala, after Linda faces what she's done. Jake squeezed my shoulder. Whatever happens tomorrow night, we're all with you. Linda thinks she's untouchable, Sam added, but she's never faced someone with the truth on their side. My phone buzzed one final time, another message from Linda. I know what you're planning. Remember, you're nobody, just an abandoned child playing dress-up in a life that was never yours. I thought of Mom's strength during her final days, of my birth mother's last letter, of all the lives Linda had destroyed to keep her secrets. Tomorrow night, I said, my voice steady, Linda learns what it means to lose everything she stole. And this time, Calvin added quietly, she won't be able to drink away her guilt. We worked through the night, perfecting every detail. By dawn, we were ready. The gala wasn't just about exposing Linda anymore. It was about justice for two mothers, a lost baby, and every life Linda had ruined to protect her secrets. The Grand Plaza Hotel's ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and society's elite. I adjusted my midnight blue dress, Mom's favorite, and watched Linda work the room, playing the grieving widow to perfection. "Everything's ready," Sam whispered, elegant in her black cocktail dress. "Calvin's in position by the emergency exit, and Jake's got the tech under control." I nodded, clutching my small purse containing the evidence we'd gathered. Across the room, Rylan Howard took the stage, her silver hair gleaming under the spotlights. "Welcome to our annual charity gala," she began. "Tonight, we honor those who've made our community stronger. First, please welcome Linda McKenzie, who's established a foundation in memory of her beloved Sylvia." The applause was polite as Linda ascended the stairs to the podium. She wore white, innocent as a dove. "Sylvia was more than my husband's first wife," Linda's voice cracked perfectly. "She was my dearest friend. That's why I'm announcing the Sylvia McKenzie Memorial Foundation for Children in Need." Jake appeared at my elbow. "Live stream's up. Local news is covering it." Linda continued, tears glistening. Sylvia's greatest joy was helping children. Though she had none of her own, she opened her heart to everyone. My hands clenched. Sam squeezed my arm. "That's why I'm pledging $5 million, Linda announced, to help children find loving homes through legal adoption. The audience gasped appreciatively. I almost laughed at the irony. "And now," Rylan returned to the podium, "we have a surprise speaker. Callie McKenzie, Sylvia's daughter, would like to say a few words." Linda's perfect mask slipped for just a second. She hadn't expected me to actually show up. I walked to the stage, passing close enough to see Linda's knuckles whiten around her champagne glass. As I reached the podium, Jake dimmed the lights and activated the presentation screen behind me. "Thank you, Rylan. Mom would have loved seeing everyone here tonight." I took a deep breath. She taught me that truth matters more than appearances. That's why I need to share something important. The first image appeared, the hospital staff photo showing Linda and Chaz 29 years ago. Before she was Linda McKenzie, socialite and philanthropist, she was Linda Wilson, nurse at Metropolitan Children's Hospital. Linda stood abruptly, but Rylan gestured for her to sit. In 1994, 2 babies were switched in that hospital. One died. The truth was covered up. I looked directly at Linda, by a nurse who'd been drinking on duty and a junior lawyer who helped hide the evidence. The next slides showed the hospital records, death certificates, and damning paperwork. The audience murmured, "That nurse then stole another baby, me, from a dying mother, arranged an illegal adoption, and spent decades destroying evidence of her crimes. This is slander." Linda shot to her feet. "She's mentally unstable." "Actually," Calvin's voice rang out as he emerged from the crowd, "everything she's saying is documented. I saved the records before you could destroy them all." "Calvin," Chaz stood up, face pale, "you disappeared. After Linda framed me for embezzlement?" Calvin smiled grimly. "I was gathering evidence, like the recordings of Linda admitting everything to Sylvia on her deathbed." Jake hit play. Linda's voice filled the ballroom. "No one can prove anything. I switched those babies, covered up that death, and no one will ever know. Sylvia, you're dying anyway. Why protect that charity case you call a daughter?" The audience gasped. Linda lunged for the podium, but Sam stepped forward. "I wouldn't," she said quietly. "The police are already on their way. We sent them everything an hour ago." Linda spun toward the exit, but security blocked her path. She turned back to me, mascara running. "You don't understand," she hissed. "That baby died because of me. I couldn't face it, couldn't let anyone know. When your birth mother died in childbirth, it was my chance to make it right. By stealing me?" My voice shook. "By destroying every life that threatened your secret? I gave you a better life," Linda screamed. "A proper family." "No," I held up my birth mother's last letter. "You stole my truth, just like you stole that other family's chance to mourn their real baby." Police officers entered the ballroom. Chaz tried to slip away but was quickly detained. "Linda Mackenzie," an officer approached. "You're under arrest for multiple counts of fraud, evidence tampering, and criminal negligence resulting in death." As they led Linda away, she locked eyes with me one last time. "I did love you," she whispered, "in my way." "Save it for the judge," Sam said coldly. Rylan Howard took the podium again, visibly shaken. "In light of these revelations, all foundation funds will be frozen pending investigation." I watched Linda disappear through the doors, her white dress stark against the officers' dark uniforms. Jake appeared beside me. "You did it," he said softly. "Both your moms would be proud." I touched the letter in my pocket, my birth mother's last words, still unread. "Tomorrow," I said. "Tonight I need to call that other family. They deserve to know the truth about their baby." "We'll do it together," Jake promised, taking my hand. For the first time since Mom's funeral, I felt truly free. Linda's web of lies had finally unraveled, and the truth, though painful, would finally bring healing. The morning after the gala, I sat in Sweet Dreams Bakery, my bakery again, surrounded by newspaper headlines about Linda's arrest. Jake brought over 2 steaming cups of coffee as Sam spread out the legal documents across our favorite table. "Linda's facing serious jail time," Sam said, highlighting key sections. "Chaz, too. They're both cooperating with investigators, trying to get lighter sentences." A gentle knock at the door made us look up. An elderly couple stood outside, Thomas and Marie, the parents of the baby who died 29 years ago. I'd called them last night after the gala. Jake let them in. Marie's eyes were red-rimmed, her husband's hand steady on her shoulder. "Thank you for agreeing to meet us," Thomas said quietly. "Would you like some coffee? Fresh pastries?" I offered, trying to steady my voice. Marie shook her head, pulling out a worn photo album. "We brought something for you." She opened to a page showing a tiny baby in a hospital bassinet. "This is our daughter, our real daughter, the one we thought was ours. We'd like you to have this picture." My hands trembled as I took it. "I'm so sorry you never knew the truth." "We named her Hope," Marie whispered. "All these years we thought she was ours. Finding out now that she belonged to another family, that our actual baby." She couldn't continue. "The police found the other family," Sam said gently. "They're flying in tomorrow. Would you like to meet them?" Thomas nodded, tears in his eyes. "We'd like that, to know about our real daughter's final days." The bell chimed again. Calvin entered carrying more files. "The hospital board is launching a full investigation," he reported. "They're implementing new security measures for the maternity ward. Linda's actions are changing policies nationwide." "Small comfort," Thomas muttered, but Marie touched his arm. "No," she said. "It means other families won't suffer like we did. That matters." My phone buzzed, a message from the detention center. Linda was requesting to see me. "You don't have to go," Jake said, reading over my shoulder. "I know." I looked at Marie and Thomas, at their grace in the face of devastating truth. "But I need to." An hour later, I sat across from Linda in the visiting room. Her designer clothes were replaced by a dull jumpsuit, her perfect makeup gone. "You look like her," Linda said abruptly. Who? Your birth mother. Sarah was her name. She was so young, so alone. I thought, Linda's hands twisted together. I thought giving you to Sylvia would make up for what I'd done to Hope. You didn't have that right, I said quietly. You played God with people's lives. I know. For the first time, Linda's voice held real remorse. After that first mistake, after Hope died, I started drinking more. When Sarah died in childbirth, I saw a chance to fix things, give you a better life than she could have. But you never stopped lying. You tried to take everything from me, because I couldn't face the truth. Linda's shoulders slumped. When your father died, when Sylvia got sick, I convinced myself I deserved it all. The money, the bakery, the reputation. I'd given you a good life, hadn't I? Mom gave me a good life, I corrected her. You just tried to steal it. Linda nodded slowly. I know that now. The police found Sarah's family, your biological grandparents. They want to meet you. My heart skipped. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know them, and because... She pulled out an envelope. This was in my personal files. It's your original birth certificate. Sarah named you Grace. I took the envelope but didn't open it. Thank you for this, but it doesn't change what you did. I know, Linda's eyes filled with tears. I'll be pleading guilty to all charges. It's time I paid for my choices. Back at the bakery, I found Jake waiting. Without a word, he pulled me into a hug. You okay? He asked softly. I will be. I showed him the envelope. My birth mother named me Grace. Beautiful name, he said. But you know what? You're still Callie to me, the strongest, most graceful person I know. Sam burst in, waving her phone. The court-approved emergency reinstatement of your ownership. The bakery's officially yours again. I looked around at the warm, familiar space where Mom had taught me everything about baking and life. At the corner table where she'd told me stories about my adoption. Stories she'd believed were true. At the kitchen where she'd shown me how to turn flour and sugar into something magical. Grace was my beginning, I said slowly, but Callie is who I became, thanks to Mom, my real mom, Sylvia. Jake squeezed my hand. Want to read your birth mother's letter now? I touched the worn envelope in my pocket, Sarah's last words to her baby Grace. Yes, I decided. It's time to know all of my truth. As the afternoon sun streamed through the bakery windows, I opened the letter, ready to embrace every part of who I was. Grace and Callie, Sarah and Sylvia's daughter, a child of both loss and love. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fresh bread through the open bakery doors as I arranged a special display of cinnamon rolls, Sarah's recipe, as it turned out. Her letter had revealed she'd been a baker too, working at a small cafe until complications in her pregnancy forced her to stop. The bell chimed. My biological grandparents, Robert and Diana, entered carrying a familiar wooden box. We found more of Sarah's recipes, Diana said, setting the box on the counter. She would have loved seeing you continue her passion. Perfect timing, I smiled, pulling out a tray of pastries. I just finished testing her orange cardamom rolls. The door chimed again. Thomas and Marie entered with the family whose baby they'd raised, Hope's biological parents. Over the past weeks, the two families had formed an unexpected bond, sharing memories and photos, healing together. Smells like heaven in here, Thomas said, hugging me. They'd become regular fixtures at the bakery, finding comfort in our shared connection to the truth. Jake emerged from the kitchen, flour dusting his dark hair. Calvin just called. Linda's sentencing is today. I nodded, trying to stay focused on arranging pastries. Sam had texted earlier. Linda was facing 15 years, Chaz 12. The evidence was overwhelming, their guilty pleas a formality. You don't have to go. Robert said gently. I know. I straightened my apron, but I need to see this through. Jake touched my shoulder. I'll drive you. At the courthouse, Sam met us outside, legal papers in hand. Linda asked to address you before sentencing. The courtroom was packed. The case had attracted national attention, leading to investigations at other hospitals, changes in adoption laws. Linda stood when I entered, her face drawn. Callie, Grace, I've had a lot of time to think in jail about choices, consequences, about how one lie led to another until I couldn't find the truth anymore. I waited, remembering Sarah's words in her letter. My dearest Grace, whatever life brings you, choose truth. It's harder, but it keeps your heart whole. I'm sorry, Linda continued, not just for what I did back then, but for trying to steal your life now. Sylvia would be so proud of who you've become. And Sarah? Her voice cracked. Sarah would be too. The judge sentenced her to 12 years with possibility of parole after 8. As they led Linda away, she turned back one last time. The bakery, she said. The recipe box had a false bottom, but did you check the sides? That evening, Jake helped me examine the old recipe box. Hidden in a hollow panel, we found a small key and an address. It's for a storage unit, Jake said, Googling the location. Inside the dusty unit, we discovered boxes of Mom's old photos, letters, and journals, including detailed records of my adoption. She'd hidden everything here, protecting the truth she'd suspected but couldn't prove. Look at this. Jake held up a photo of Mom at the hospital, holding newborn me. Linda stood in the background watching. She knew, even then. But she chose to love me anyway, I said softly. Even knowing something wasn't right, she chose to be my mom. Back at the bakery, I gathered everyone, Jake, Sam, Calvin, my grandparents, Thomas and Marie, Hope's biological parents. The evening sun painted the walls golden as I brought out a special cake. Sarah's recipe, I explained, with Mom's frosting, because I am both of their daughters, and all of you are my family, not by blood or papers, but by truth and love. Diana wiped her eyes. Sarah would have loved this place. She always dreamed of owning a bakery. That's why I'm renaming it, I revealed, unveiling the new sign. Sweet Dreams will become Sarah's Grace. Perfect, Jake squeezed my hand. Both your mothers, both your names. And look, Sam pointed out the window. A young couple peered in, admiring the displays. Your first customers under the new name. As I welcomed them in, I caught my reflection in the window. My smile, Sarah's eyes, Mom's determination. Linda had tried to bury the truth, but it had bloomed instead, creating something beautiful from the ashes of lies. The couple ordered Sarah's orange cardamom rolls and Mom's signature chocolate cake. As I boxed their order, Jake hung the final touch beside the register, a double frame. On one side, Sarah held newborn me. On the other, Mom taught toddler me to roll dough. 2 mothers, Jake said softly. 2 names, 1 amazing woman. I looked around at my unlikely family, bound by truth, strengthened by love. Linda's lies had meant to destroy us all, but instead, they'd brought us together, creating something stronger than secrets. Welcome to Sarah's Grace, I told the customers, my voice sure and strong. Everything here is baked with love and truth. Outside, the new sign caught the last rays of sunlight, glowing like a promise kept, a legacy honored, a truth finally set free.
The call came on a Tuesday evening, just as I was wrapping up another 14-hour workday. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number, but the area code was painfully familiar. I almost didn't answer. Quinn speaking. Silence crackled through the line, then, Quinn, it's Trey. My hand froze on the stack of briefs I'd been organizing. 5 years of carefully constructed walls threatened to crumble at the sound of his voice. I'm Quinn Nichols, and until that moment, I thought I'd finally moved past the woman who lost everything to the man on the other end of this call. I need your help, he said, his voice rough with desperation. Please, I laughed, sharp and bitter. You've got some nerve. I know, but you're the best family lawyer in the state now, and... He paused. Marley's trying to take my kids. Marley, my former best friend, the woman he left me for 3 weeks after I lost our baby. The perfect pair who destroyed my life and built their own on its ashes. Find another lawyer, I said, reaching to end the call. Wait, his voice cracked. Just meet with me. One meeting. Please, Quinn. A knock at my office door saved me from responding. Valeria, my law partner, stuck her head in. Still here? The Thompson deposition's at 8 tomorrow. I held up one finger, then spoke into the phone. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office, don't be late. I hung up before he could respond. Was that who I think it was? Valeria asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. I nodded, my hands shaking as I straightened papers that didn't need straightening. The universe has a sick sense of humor. Want to talk about it? Not really. I stood, grabbing my coat, but I could use a drink. 20 minutes later, we sat in our usual corner booth at O'Malley's. Valeria waited until the waitress delivered our wines before leaning forward. Spill. Remember the case that made me switch to family law? I took a long sip of Cabernet. The woman whose husband left her for her best friend while she was still grieving a miscarriage. That was you? Valeria's eyes widened. I always thought... Damn, Quinn. Yeah. I traced the rim of my glass. That's why I left corporate law, threw myself into women's advocacy instead, needed something meaningful after everything. And now he wants your help? Against Marley. I couldn't help but smile, though it felt more like baring teeth. Karma's a fascinating thing, isn't it? Valeria studied me carefully. You're not actually considering it? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Zoe. Just saw Trey's name trending. You might want to check the news. I pulled up the local news site, and there it was. Tech CEO Trey Wheeler steps down amid scandal. The article detailed allegations of financial misconduct, with Marley quoted extensively about her husband's betrayal of trust. Well, well, Valeria murmured, reading over my shoulder. Looks like someone's world is imploding. Good, I said, but the word felt hollow. 5 years ago, I would have celebrated this. Now. I should call Bethany. Your mentor? Why? Because tomorrow morning, I'm going to sit across from the man who broke me, and I need to know if I can represent him without destroying what's left of my soul. I drained my wine. Or, if I should, Valeria grabbed my hand. Quinn, listen to me. You've built something amazing here. Your cases have changed lives. Don't let him drag you back into that darkness. Maybe that's exactly why I should take it. I met her concerned gaze. Who better to ensure justice is served than someone who knows exactly what they're capable of? My phone buzzed again. Another text from Zoe. Whatever you're thinking, call me first. Remember what you always tell your clients. Revenge might feel good, but justice feels better. I stared at the message, remembering all the women I'd helped over the years. The ones who'd lost everything, just like me. The ones who'd found their strength again, just like me. You know what the worst part is? I said finally. Part of me still wants to help him. The part that remembers who he was before everything. That's because you're a good person, Valeria said. But good people can make dangerous opponents when pushed too far. I thought about the meeting tomorrow, about facing Trey across my desk, about looking into the eyes that once held my whole world and seeing desperation instead of love. Order another round, I told Valeria. I need to figure out if I'm going to be his salvation or his reckoning. She signaled the waitress, then turned back to me with a knowing look. Why do I have a feeling you're going to be both? I didn't answer. I was too busy planning how to turn this unexpected reunion into something that would serve justice. Real justice, for everyone involved, including me. 9 o'clock sharp, and my assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Ms. Nichols, Mr. Wheeler is here. I took a deep breath, straightened my blazer, and pressed the button. Send him in. The man who walked through my door wasn't the polished CEO I'd seen in news photos. His designer suit hung loose on his frame, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually perfect hair needed a trim. Good. Quinn, he said, stopping just inside the doorway. Thank you for... Sit down, I cut him off, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. You have 30 minutes. He sat, hands fidgeting with his wedding ring, a different one than the one I'd placed on his finger 8 years ago. I don't know where to start. Try the truth. For once. His flinch was satisfying. I deserve that. I deserve worse. He ran a hand through his hair. Marley's trying to take everything. The kids, the house, my company shares. I saw the news. Financial misconduct? It's all lies. His voice cracked. She set me up. Used my login credentials to make unauthorized transfers, deleted the evidence, then reported me to the board. I can't prove it was her, but... And now she wants full custody of your children? He nodded, pulling out his phone. Look. He slid it across the desk, showing me a photo of 2 children, a boy around 4 and a girl, maybe 2. Tommy and Sarah. She's threatening to tell the judge I'm unstable, that I'm a danger to them. She's already convinced the board I'm a criminal. I studied the photo longer than necessary, fighting the twist in my gut. Those could have been our children. Why me? I asked finally. There are plenty of good family lawyers in this city. Because you're the best, because you know her, the real her. He leaned forward. And because you're the only one who might understand what she's capable of. Careful, I warned. That's your wife you're talking about. Soon-to-be ex-wife. He laughed bitterly. Karma, right? I left you for her, and now... Stop. I stood up, walking to the window. This isn't about us, isn't it? His voice was closer now. He'd stood too. Quinn, I know I hurt you. What I did was unforgivable, but these are my kids. I turned to face him. And what makes you think I won't hurt you right back? Because I know you. Despite everything, you believe in justice. Real justice. He stepped closer. And because you've spent the last 5 years helping people like me, parents fighting to keep their children. Parents like you? My laugh was harsh. You mean parents who destroyed their families? Who betrayed everyone who loved them? Parents who made mistakes, he corrected quietly. Parents who would do anything to protect their children. Before I could respond, my door opened and Valeria walked in. Perfect timing. We'd planned this interruption. Sorry to interrupt, she said, not sounding sorry at all. Quinn, the Martinez hearing got moved up. We need to review the strategy. Give me 5 minutes, I told her, then turned back to Trey. Show me the custody filing. He pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase, hands shaking slightly as he handed it over. I skimmed the documents, my jaw tightening at Marley's allegations. Emotional abuse, financial manipulation, paranoid behavior. She's going for the jugular, I murmured. Will you help me? His voice was barely a whisper. I looked up, meeting his desperate gaze. I'll review the case, that's all I'm promising right now. Thank you. He stood, reaching for his briefcase. Quinn, Don't. I held up a hand. If I take this case, we keep things strictly professional. No apologies, no explanations, no past. Just the facts and the law. Understood? He nodded. When will you decide? I'll call you tomorrow. I pressed the intercom. Lisa, please show Mr. Wheeler out. After he left, Valeria closed the door and raised an eyebrow. Well? I held up the custody filing. Read this. Tell me what you think. She took the papers, scanning quickly. Her eyes widened. These allegations, they're almost identical to what happened with us, I finished. Right down to the gaslighting accusations. You think she's using your past as a template? I think Marley hasn't changed. I sat back down, mind racing. She's still the same manipulative person who helped destroy my marriage, only now she's doing it to him. So, you're taking the case? I pulled out my phone, pulling up the photo of Tommy and Sarah. Those kids don't deserve to be pawns in their mother's game. I looked up at Valeria. Call Bethany. Tell her I need her to co-counsel. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. And Trey? Trey's just a client. I started typing an email to my investigator. But Marley? She's about to learn why they call me the Ice Queen of Family Court. Valeria smiled. Now that's the Quinn I know. I returned her smile, but inside, my heart was racing. Tomorrow I'd call Trey and accept his case. And then the real battle would begin. You're playing with fire, Bethany said, tossing the case file onto her mahogany desk. We were in her corner office, the city skyline glittering behind her. Taking your ex-husband's case against your former best friend? The media will have a field day. Let them. I crossed my legs, projecting more confidence than I felt. It might actually help us. How so? Because the moment this hits the news, every woman Marley has ever wronged will come forward. I pulled out my phone, showing Bethany the emails I'd received since word got out. 3 already have. Bethany leaned forward, reading. Her eyebrows shot up. These are serious allegations. And familiar ones. I swiped to the next email. She has a pattern. Befriend, manipulate, destroy, profit. She did it to me, she's doing it to Trey, and according to these women, she's done it before. A knock at the door interrupted us. Valeria entered, waving a tablet. You need to see this. She pulled up a video, Marley on a morning show, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. I'm just so worried about the children, she sobbed. When I discovered the financial irregularities, I had to act. But now he's hired his ex-wife as his lawyer, and I fear what they might do. Turn it off, I snapped. She's playing the victim card perfectly, Bethany mused, and painting you as the vengeful ex. My phone buzzed, Zoe calling. Hey, sis. Have you seen it? She didn't wait for an answer. Quinn, this is exactly what she wants. She's baiting you. I know. I put the phone on speaker. But she made a mistake. What's that? She mentioned the kids. I smiled grimly. Which means I can subpoena their school records, medical records, everything, including the incident report from Tommy's preschool last month. Valeria's head snapped up. What incident report? The one where Tommy's teacher documented bruises and emotional distress after returning from a weekend with Marley. I pulled out another file. My investigator found it this morning. Bethany whistled low. That's going to hurt her case. Quinn, Zoe's voice was worried. Be careful. Remember what happened last time someone threatened Marley's perfect image? I did remember. The photos she'd doctored, the rumors she'd spread, the carefully orchestrated character assassination that had left me looking like the unstable one. Not this time, I said firmly. This time I have proof. A text message popped up on my phone from Trey. Marley just served me with an emergency custody motion, hearing tomorrow at 9. She's moving fast, Bethany observed, because she knows we're gathering evidence. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. Valeria, prep the witness list. Bethany, I need you to handle the financial angle. Follow those transfers. Find the proof it was her. Zoe, can you... Already on it, my sister interrupted. I'm reaching out to my social media contacts. If there are more victims, we'll find them. After ending the call, I turned to Bethany. You haven't asked why I'm really doing this. Don't need to. She stood, coming around her desk. 5 years ago, you walked into my office, barely holding yourself together, and asked me to mentor you in family law. Said you wanted to help people who'd been betrayed like you had. And now I'm helping the man who betrayed me. No. She put a hand on my shoulder. You're helping his children, and exposing a woman who's hurt too many people. My phone buzzed again. An email from Marley's attorney, Samir. I read it aloud. Consider this a professional courtesy. My client has documentation of your past mental health struggles following your miscarriage. Drop this case, or it becomes public record. Valeria swore. Bethany's face hardened, but I felt oddly calm. Forward that to Ethics Council, I told Valeria, and draft a response. Tell him if he wants to play dirty, I have 5 years of text messages from when his client was my best friend, including the ones where she detailed her plans to seduce my husband. You kept those? Bethany asked. I kept everything. I gathered my files. I just never had a reason to use them before. The press will be at the hearing tomorrow, Valeria warned. Good. I headed for the door. Because I have something to say to them. Quinn, Bethany's voice stopped me. What are you planning? I turned back. Remember what you taught me? Sometimes the best defense is a strong offense. And sometimes, she countered, it's knowing when to show mercy. Mercy? I laughed. Like the mercy Marley showed me when I was grieving my baby? Like the mercy she's showing those kids? Just remember, Bethany said softly, revenge and justice aren't always the same thing. I nodded, but as I walked out, I couldn't help thinking they might be this time. Because tomorrow, in that courtroom, Marley would learn what happens when you underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when I arrived. Marley had already made her entrance, playing the devastated mother perfectly in a conservative blue dress and pearls. I adjusted my grip on my briefcase and started up the stairs. Ms. Nichols, is it true you're representing your ex-husband? How do you respond to allegations of a vendetta? What about the conflict of interest? I stopped, turning to face the cameras. I'll make one statement. This case isn't about me, my ex-husband, or his current wife. It's about two children who deserve to have their best interests represented without bias or manipulation. That's what I intend to do. Inside, Trey waited by the courtroom doors, looking worse than yesterday. They're not letting me see the kids, he whispered as I approached. Marley's claiming I'm a flight risk. Did you try to contact them? Just Tommy's teacher. I wanted to make sure he was okay after... He swallowed hard. After what happened last weekend. Tell me everything, I said, leading him to a quiet corner. Tommy had a meltdown at drop-off, said he didn't want to go with her. When I tried to calm him down, Marley started recording, saying I was emotionally manipulating him. His hands shook. Then yesterday, Sarah's daycare called her about bruises on Sarah's arms. She blamed me. Before I could respond, Samir approached, his expensive suit matching his shark-like smile. Quinn, always a pleasure, though I must say this is an interesting career choice. Save it, I cut him off. Your emergency motion is baseless and you know it. Is it? He pulled out his phone. I have video of Mr. Wheeler physically restraining his son during a custody exchange. Quite disturbing footage. You mean the video of a father comforting his distraught child? I smiled back. The same video where your client can be heard threatening to make daddy pay? Please submit it. The judge should see everything. His smile faltered slightly. We have other evidence. Of course you do. Just like you had evidence 5 years ago. I stepped closer. How's your daughter, Samir? Still at Brighton Academy? Same school as Tommy, right? He stiffened. Are you threatening? Not at all. Just wondering if she's mentioned the incident last month. The one where Tommy came to school with bruises after a weekend with his mother. The one the school reported to CPS. The courtroom doors opened before he could respond. Inside, Marley sat at the plaintiff's table, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She didn't look at me as we passed. Judge Martinez entered, and we all rose. Be seated, she said, reviewing the file. This is an emergency motion for temporary full custody, based on allegations of emotional abuse and financial misconduct. Ms. Nichols, your response? I stood. Your Honor, this motion is nothing but a tactical maneuver designed to prejudice my client before the actual custody hearing. We have evidence that the plaintiff herself is the source of both the financial irregularities and the children's emotional distress. Objection! Samir jumped up. Counsel is making unsubstantiated accusations. If I may, I held up a flash drive. We have documentation of unauthorized transfers made from Mr. Wheeler's accounts using Mrs. Wheeler's IP address. We also have testimony from the children's teachers about concerning behavior and statements made by both children after visits with their mother. Judge Martinez frowned. Mr. Rodriguez, did you receive these documents? No, Your Honor, because they don't exist. This is a desperate attempt by counsel to protect her ex-husband. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out another file. I'd like to address that. Your Honor, I move to submit these text messages as evidence of the plaintiff's pattern of manipulation and false allegations. Marley's head snapped up, her eyes meeting mine for the first time. I saw the moment she realized which messages I meant. Your Honor, Samir protested, Any personal communications between Ms. Nichols and my client from years ago are irrelevant. They're extremely relevant, I countered, as they establish a pattern of behavior that directly relates to the current allegations, including Mrs. Wheeler's documented history of fabricating evidence to achieve her goals. The judge held up her hand. I've heard enough. This emergency motion is denied. However, she fixed me with a stern look. Ms. Nichols, while there's no technical conflict of interest here, I'm concerned about the personal history involved. Your Honor, I said quietly, I understand the concern, but I also understand these children's situation better than most. I've seen firsthand what Mrs. Wheeler is capable of. These kids need someone who can't be manipulated or intimidated into backing down. Judge Martinez studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. Regular custody hearing remains scheduled for next week. We're adjourned. As people filed out, Marley brushed past me, whispering, You'll regret this. I caught her arm. No, Marley, you will, because this time I'm ready for you. She yanked away, but I saw the flash of fear in her eyes. Good, she should be afraid, because I had only shown her the tip of the iceberg, and the rest? That would come out in court. Tommy, can you tell me about what happened at school last month? I kept my voice gentle, watching the 4-year-old boy push a toy car across the table in the courthouse interview room. Mommy said not to talk about it, he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. It's okay, the court-appointed child advocate assured him. You can tell Ms. Quinn anything. Tommy glanced at the door, then leaned closer to me. I got in trouble because I couldn't sit still. My arms hurt. Why did your arms hurt? Before he could answer, the door burst open. Marley stormed in, Samir right behind her. This interview is over, she snapped, reaching for Tommy. You had no right. I had every right, I stood, blocking her path. This is a court-ordered evaluation. With his father's lawyer, please, she turned to the advocate. She's biased. She's trying to poison my son against me. Mrs. Wheeler, the advocate said firmly, this is a supervised interview. If you interrupt again, I'll have to report it to the judge. Marley's perfect mask slipped for just a second, revealing something ugly underneath. She smoothed her expression quickly, but I'd seen it. So had Tommy, who pressed himself against my leg. Fine. She straightened her designer jacket. But my attorney stays. Of course, I said smoothly. He can witness Tommy telling us about the bruises. Samir touched Marley's arm. Perhaps we should... No. She knelt by Tommy. Sweetie, remember what we talked about? About keeping our special secrets? Mrs. Wheeler, the advocate stood. You cannot coach the witness. I pulled out my phone, hitting record. Please repeat what you just said to your son. Turn that off, Samir demanded. Make me. A commotion outside saved us from further argument. Zoe burst in, waving a tablet. Quinn, you need to see this. Now. I followed her into the hallway, where she showed me a social media post. A woman named Rachel had gone viral describing her experience working as Marley's personal assistant 2 years ago. She claims Marley made her falsify documents, Zoe explained. Bank statements, emails, everything. Says she has proof. Find her, I said. Get her in front of a judge. Already done. She's willing to testify. Zoe hesitated. But Quinn, she also mentioned something else, about Marley having an affair. With who? Samir. I felt the pieces click into place. The aggressive legal strategy, the convenient evidence, the way they worked together so smoothly. Get me everything you can on both of them, I told Zoe. Bank records, hotel receipts, anything. Back in the interview room, Marley was whispering intensely to Samir. They both looked up when I entered, and I couldn't help but notice how close they were standing. Interview's over, I announced. But don't worry, we got enough. This is harassment, Marley hissed. I'll file a complaint with the Bar Association. Go ahead, I smiled. While you're at it, explain why your attorney's credit card paid for a room at the Marina Hotel last weekend. The same weekend you told Trey you were visiting your sister. The color drained from both their faces. Samir recovered first. That's a baseless accusation. Is it? Because Rachel has some interesting things to say about your professional relationship. Marley grabbed her purse. Come on, Tommy. Actually, the advocate interjected, given what's transpired here, I'm recommending Tommy stay with his father pending our next hearing. You can't do that. She can, I said, and she will. Unless you'd like to explain to the judge why you were coaching your son to keep secrets? Marley's face contorted with rage. You think you're so clever, don't you? Using my past mistakes against me? No, Marley, I'm using your present mistakes against you. I stepped closer. The difference is, this time I have proof. She grabbed my arm, nails digging in. I destroyed you once. I can do it again. Mrs. Wheeler, the advocate warned, remove your hand or I'll call security. Marley let go, but her eyes promised violence. This isn't over. You're right, I agreed. It's just beginning. After they left, Zoe hugged me. You okay? I watched Tommy leave with the advocate, heading to meet Trey. The little boy looked back at me and gave a tiny wave. I'm fine, I said. But we need to move fast. Get that witness ready. And Zoe? Yeah? Tell Bethany to pull the security footage from this interview. I want the judge to see exactly how Marley acts when she thinks no one's watching. Already on it. Zoe squeezed my hand. You're going to win this. It's not about winning anymore. I gathered my files, thinking of Tommy's frightened eyes and Marley's threats. It's about making sure she can never hurt anyone else again. But as I left the courthouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that Marley had one more card to play. And whatever it would be devastating. The email arrived at midnight. No subject line, just an attachment. The sender was anonymous, but I knew exactly who it was from. I called Valeria immediately. Check your inbox. I'm forwarding something. A moment later, holy shit, is this real? Looks like it. I stared at the photo on my screen. Me, 5 years ago, in the parking lot of a mental health clinic. She must have had someone following me back then. Quinn, this could destroy your reputation. The timestamp. This was 2 days before you took the bar exam, when I was supposedly too unstable to function. I laughed bitterly. She's going to leak it to the press. My doorbell rang, making me jump. Through the peephole, I saw Zoe holding up a bottle of wine. I have to go, I told Valeria. Meeting tomorrow? First thing? I opened the door for my sister, who took one look at my face and said, What did she do now? I showed her the email while pouring us both generous glasses of wine. Zoe's expression darkened as she read. That manipulative bit. She stopped mid-word as her phone buzzed. Wait, Rachel just sent me something. You need to see this. She pulled up a video on her phone. It showed Marley in an office arguing with someone off camera. Where did this come from? Rachel secretly recorded it when she worked for Marley. Watch. In the video, Marley was furious. I don't care what it takes, she snarled. Doctor the documents. Make it look like he's embezzling. I want him ruined. That's about Trey, I breathed. This proves she set him up. Keep watching, Marley continued. Once the board forces him out, I'll get primary custody. Then we can finally be together. The camera shifted, revealing Samir stepping into frame. Got you, I whispered. My phone rang. Trey. Quinn, someone broke into my house. I sat up straight. Are you okay? The kids? We're fine. We were at my parents', but they took my laptop and some files, the ones with the original financial records. Call the police, I ordered. I'm on my way. 20 minutes later, I stood in Trey's ransacked home office while police photographed the scene. Zoe had come with me and was now helping Trey calm the kids upstairs. This was professional, the detective said, pointing out the clean cuts on the window lock. They knew exactly what they were looking for. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off, or the photos go public. Your career won't survive the scandal. I showed it to the detective. Add this to the report. It's connected. Ms. Nichols? A young officer called from the hallway. We found something. He led us to the kitchen, where a small recording device was taped under the sink. Place has been bugged. Check everywhere, the detective ordered. Ms. Nichols, given the circumstances, you might want to sweep your office too. I was already texting Bethany when Zoe came downstairs. Kids are asleep. Trey's with them. She lowered her voice. Quinn, Sarah said something about Uncle Sam coming to visit Mommy when Daddy's not home. Uncle Sam? The detective looked up. Samir Rodriguez? Her attorney, I confirmed, and apparently much more. I'll need statements from both children. Through proper channels, I insisted. They've been through enough trauma. Back in the office, Trey was going through his remaining files. The backup drive is gone too. Without those records, we don't need them anymore. I showed him Rachel's video. We have this instead. He watched, his face hardening. She set me up, all of it. The company, the kids, everything. It was all a setup. Mr. Wheeler? The detective returned. We found 3 more listening devices. Based on the model, they've been here at least 6 months. 6 months, Trey repeated. That's when I first suspected the financial irregularities. My phone buzzed again. Another anonymous email. This time, more photos. Me outside my therapist's office. At a grief support group. Private moments from my darkest days, all documented. She's getting desperate, Zoe observed. Good. I started typing a response. Because so am I. What are you going to do? I hit send, then showed them my reply. Release whatever you want. I'm not ashamed of getting help after what you did. But remember, the truth always comes out. And I have so much more truth to share. Quinn, Trey said quietly, you don't have to risk everything for us. I'm not doing it for you. I watched the police bag evidence, thinking of Tommy's bruises and Sarah's fear. I'm doing it because someone needs to stop her, and because 5 years ago I wasn't strong enough to fight back, but I am now. My phone lit up with Marley's response. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., the cafe where we used to meet. Come alone. I showed it to the detective, who immediately said, We'll wire you. No, I grabbed my coat. She'll be watching, but don't worry, I'll be recording everything. Because this time, when Marley tried to destroy someone's life, she'd find her target ready and waiting, and I had nothing left to lose. The cafe looked exactly the same as it had 5 years ago, when Marley and I would meet for our weekly coffee dates. Back when I thought she was my best friend. Back before she destroyed my life. She sat at our old table, stirring her latte. Same perfect makeup, same expensive highlights, same calculated smile when she saw me. Quinn, you came alone? As requested. I sat down, declining the waitress's offer of coffee. Let's skip the small talk. Always so direct. She sighed. That's your problem, you know. No subtlety. Unlike you, breaking into Trey's house, bugging his office, following me 5 years ago, that kind of subtlety. Her smile didn't waver. I have no idea what you're talking about. Really? Should we call Samir and ask him? I pulled out my phone, showing her the cafe's security camera feed streaming live to my screen. Or should we ask the detective watching from across the street? Finally, the smile cracked. You stupid bitch, you think you're so clever? No, Marley, I think I'm done playing games. I leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop the custody case, confess to the financial fraud, leave Trey's kids alone. She laughed. Or what? You'll release that video of me and Samir? Go ahead. I'll just claim it's doctored, like everything else. Everything else? Like the evidence you planted to frame Trey? Prove it. Her eyes glittered. Oh, wait, you can't, because those records are gone. Actually, I pulled out a USB drive. Rachel kept copies, of everything, including your emails planning the whole thing. The color drained from her face. She wouldn't dare. She already has. She's giving her statement to the DA right now. I checked my watch. Along with 3 other former employees you've threatened or blackmailed. Marley's hand shook as she reached for her coffee. I'll deny it all. It's my word against theirs. And the kids? What about Tommy's bruises? Sarah's Uncle Sam visits? You bitch, she hissed. You turned them against me. No, you did that yourself. I stood up. It's over, Marley. Walk away now, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. She grabbed my wrist. I'll release those photos. Everyone will know you had a breakdown. No one will trust you to practice law again. Go ahead. I pulled free. Because I've already released them myself. What? I showed her my phone again, this time displaying my firm's website. There, in a new blog post, was my story, the miscarriage, the betrayal, the therapy, the recovery, everything. You see, I said quietly, you can't shame someone who's not ashamed. You can't threaten someone who's already faced their worst fears. You're bluffing, she whispered, but I saw the panic in her eyes. Check your phone. She did. Her face went white as messages started pouring in. The story was already going viral. Here's the deal, I continued. Sign these papers. I placed a folder on the table. Full custody to Trey, a confession about the financial fraud, a restraining order keeping you away from the kids. You can't, or I release everything else. The videos, the emails, the testimony from your former employees, everything. You'd destroy my life? Her voice cracked. After all we meant to each other? Like you destroyed mine? I stood up. The difference is I'm giving you a choice, more than you ever gave me. She stared at the papers for a long moment. Then, with shaking hands, she reached for a pen. I want to see my kids, she whispered. That's up to the court, and their therapist. I watched her sign. But first, you need help, Marley. Real help. She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw something real in her eyes. Fear, maybe even regret. What happens now? Now? I gathered the signed papers. Now you leave, move away, start over. But if you ever come near those kids again... You'll destroy me, she finished. No. I shook my head. You've already done that yourself. As I walked out, the detective met me at the door. We got it all on camera. The DA's ready to move on the fraud charges. Good. I handed him the signed confession. Make sure Samir's included in the investigation. My phone buzzed. Trey. Is it done? It's done, I texted back. The kids are safe. Walking to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally faced my past and come out stronger. My phone rang. Bethany. I saw the blog post, she said. You okay? Better than okay. I smiled, watching Marley leave the cafe in tears. I'm free. And the kids? They're free too. I started my car. That's all that matters. Because in the end, this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. And sometimes, they look exactly the same. All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Martinez presiding. I stood beside Trey as the judge entered, my case files organized and ready. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, law students, and what seemed like half the legal community had come to witness the final hearing. Marley's seat was empty. According to her new attorney, she'd checked herself into a treatment facility the day after our cafe meeting. Part of me hoped she'd actually get the help she needed. Before we proceed, Judge Martinez began, I want to acknowledge the unusual circumstances of this case. Ms. Nichols, your public statement about your personal connection to this matter has raised some eyebrows in the legal community. Yes, Your Honor. However, she continued, your transparency and professional conduct throughout these proceedings have been exemplary. The court appreciates your handling of this sensitive situation. I nodded, feeling Trey's tension beside me. Given the evidence presented, including Mrs. Wheeler's signed confession and subsequent actions, I'm prepared to rule on the custody arrangement. The judge looked directly at Trey. Mr. Wheeler, please stand. He stood, hands trembling slightly. The court grants you full custody of Thomas and Sarah Wheeler. Mrs. Wheeler's visitation rights will be suspended pending completion of her treatment program and psychiatric evaluation. Furthermore, she shuffled some papers. The restraining order will remain in effect for the children's protection. I heard Trey's shaky exhale of relief. Your Honor, I said, regarding the financial allegations against my client? Yes. Given Mrs. Wheeler's confession and the evidence provided by former employees, all charges against Mr. Wheeler have been dropped. The DA's office will be handling the fraud case against Mrs. Wheeler and Mr. Rodriguez separately. As we gathered our things after adjournment, Bethany approached with Valeria. "Impressive work," Bethany said, hugging me. "Though I hear the State Bar Association wants to talk to you." My stomach dropped. "About what?" "About heading their new ethics committee," she grinned. "Apparently, your blog post about maintaining professional integrity while handling personal trauma has become required reading at 3 law schools." "Speaking of reading," Valeria added, "you might want to check your emails. The women's advocacy groups are fighting over who gets to have you as their keynote speaker." Before I could respond, I heard a small voice. "Ms. Quinn!" Tommy ran up, Sarah toddling behind him with Zoe. The little boy crashed into my legs, hugging tight. "Thank you for helping my daddy," he said. I knelt down to his level. "You helped too, buddy. You were very brave." "Will we see Mommy again?" I glanced at Trey, who nodded slightly. "When she's feeling better, and only if you want to, but for now you're going to stay with your daddy, okay?" Sarah reached for my hand with her tiny fingers. "Story time?" "Actually," Trey said, "I was hoping we could all get ice cream to celebrate." "Ice cream!" Tommy bounced excitedly. "Quinn?" Trey looked at me uncertainly. "Would you join us?" 5 years ago, this invitation would have broken me. Now, looking at these children who'd somehow worked their way into my heart, I felt only peace. "I'd love to," I said. "But first..." I walked over to the prosecution's table where Samir's case files lay. His disbarment hearing was next week, and my testimony would ensure he never practiced law again. "Justice comes in many forms," Bethany said, following my gaze. "Yes," I agreed. "But mercy does too." I turned to Trey. "You know what? Let's skip ice cream. I know a great park with an amazing playground. These kids could probably use some sunshine." Tommy's face lit up. "Can we feed the ducks?" "Absolutely." As we walked out of the courthouse, reporters called my name asking for statements. I stopped briefly. "The only statement I have is this: the truth always finds its way to the light. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning, but in helping others heal." At the park, watching Tommy and Sarah laugh on the swings while Trey pushed them, Zoe sat beside me on a bench. "You know," she said, "when you took this case, I thought you were either crazy or masochistic. Maybe a little of both. But now I get it. This was never about Trey or Marlee." "No," I agreed. "It was about doing what's right, even when it hurts. About facing your demons and realizing they don't control you anymore." My phone buzzed. A text from Bethany. "Women's Crisis Center board meeting tomorrow. They want you to lead their legal advocacy program. You in?" I looked at the kids playing, at Trey's relieved smile, at the life I'd built from the ashes of betrayal. "I'm in," I texted back, "because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something beautiful from something broken. It's helping others find their strength. It's remembering that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to choose justice over vengeance, healing over hurt." And as I joined Tommy and Sarah at the duck pond, their small hands trustingly in mine, I knew I'd made the right choice. This was my victory. Not because I'd won, but because I'd helped break a cycle of pain. And in doing so, I'd finally set myself free.
The text message from my brother made my stomach clench. "Can't wait to hear about all your pro bono cases defending criminals, sis. Maybe you'll finally admit law school was wasted on you. I'm Eliana, and my little brother has always had a talent for getting under my skin." The family reunion invitation sat on my granite countertop like a ticking time bomb. Mom's elegant handwriting promising an evening of family bonding and celebration. What it should have said was passive-aggressive comments and judgment. "You could always cancel," Braden suggested, sliding a fresh coffee across my desk. My colleague and closest friend at the firm had endured years of my family drama stories. And give Adrian the satisfaction? Never. I took a sip of the coffee, savoring its bitter warmth. Besides, Mom would never forgive me. "You could just tell them the truth," he said, leaning against my office doorframe. "Partner at Thompson, Campbell and Associates isn't exactly something to be ashamed of." I shook my head, watching the city lights flicker to life outside my corner office window. "They think I'm still a public defender, because that's what Adrian tells everyone. He's convinced himself that's all I'll ever be. The truth was more complicated. Yes, I'd started as a public defender, and I was damn proud of that work. But 5 years ago, Reese Campbell had seen something in me during a high-profile case. Now, at 35, I was the youngest partner in the firm's history. Not that my family knew any of this. My phone buzzed again. Mom this time. Honey, please try to keep the peace tomorrow. Your brother's going through a lot right now. Going through a lot? I scoffed, showing Braden the message. He's going through a divorce because he couldn't keep his hands off his secretary. That's hardly a tragedy. Speaking of which, Braden's expression turned serious. Have you heard who's handling his wife's case? Before I could answer, my assistant Sarah poked her head in. Ms. Sutton, your mother's here. Mom swept into my office like a perfectly coiffed hurricane, her designer handbag swinging. Eliana, darling, I thought we could have lunch before tomorrow's party. I watched Braden make a strategic retreat, mouthing good luck as he disappeared. Mom, I'm working. You can't just show up. In that tiny public defender's office you're always talking about? She glanced around my obviously luxurious office with confusion. This seems different. I'm covering for a friend. I lied smoothly, the same excuse I'd used for years. What's really going on? She sank into one of my client chairs, her perfectly maintained facade cracking slightly. It's your brother. This divorce. It's going to be ugly. Natasha's hired some high-powered firm. Has she? I kept my voice neutral, though my heart was racing. Thompson, Campbell something or other. They're sharks, apparently. Mom wrung her hands. Adrian's beside himself. He says they'll take everything. I bit back a laugh. If she only knew. Maybe he should have thought about that before sleeping with his 24-year-old secretary, I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Eliana, he made a mistake. We all make mistakes. She reached across my desk, patting my hand. Just be gentle with him tomorrow? He's been saying some things about you, I know, but he's hurting. The irony was almost too much to bear. Tomorrow night, at our family reunion, Adrian would undoubtedly mock my career choices again. He'd make snide comments about public defenders and wasted potential, completely unaware that on Monday morning, I'd be sitting across from him in a conference room as opposing counsel's partner. I'll behave if he does, I promised, knowing full well what was coming. Mom stood, smoothing her designer dress. That's all I ask. And darling, maybe wear something a little more professional tomorrow? That navy suit you used to have was nice. I glanced down at my Armani pantsuit and Louboutin heels, easily worth more than what Adrian made in a month. I'll see what I can find. After she left, I pulled up Adrian's divorce file on my computer. There it was in black and white. Natasha Evans versus Adrian Sutton. Primary counsel, Reese Campbell. Partner in charge, Eliana Sutton. My phone buzzed one more time. Another text from Adrian. Hope you're ready for tomorrow, sis. Brought some big news to share. Time to show everyone what real success looks like. I smiled, thinking about Monday morning's meeting. Oh, Adrian, I whispered to my empty office. You have no idea. 5 years earlier, I sat across from Reese Campbell in a cramped courthouse hallway, my public defender's badge feeling like a target on my chest. You made quite an impression in there, she said, studying me with sharp eyes. Not many lawyers would have caught that inconsistency in the prosecution's evidence. I clutched my worn briefcase tighter. Just doing my job. Your job? Reese laughed. You dismantled the DA's entire case. My client was ready to plead guilty until you proved his innocence. That case had been my breakthrough. A young man wrongly accused of armed robbery, his life hanging by a thread. I'd spent weeks piecing together security footage, proving he'd been across town when the crime occurred. I believe in being thorough, I said, standing to leave. Wait! Reese handed me her business card. Come see me next week. I think you're wasting your talent here. That memory played through my mind as I walked into the family reunion, fashionably late. The country club's banquet room buzzed with conversation, crystal glasses clinking as relatives mingled. There's my favorite failure! Adrian's voice boomed across the room. He was already 3 drinks in, his designer suit slightly rumpled. Still saving the world one criminal at a time? Adrian! I nodded coolly, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. You know, he continued, loud enough for nearby relatives to hear, I just closed a 7-figure deal last week. Meanwhile, my big sister's probably still making what, 40 grand a year? Our cousin Maria winced. Adrian, maybe we should… No, let's hear about Eliana's noble sacrifice. He interrupted. Tell us, sis, how many drug dealers did you keep out of jail this month? I took a deliberate sip of champagne. Actually, I've moved on from criminal defense. Oh? His eyebrows shot up. Finally admitted defeat? Before I could respond, Mom appeared between us. Children, please. Adrian, honey, maybe you should slow down on the drinks. I'm celebrating, Mom. He threw an arm around her shoulders. Did you tell her my news? About the merger? I was just about to, Mom said, shooting me a warning look. Adrian's company is merging with… A commotion near the entrance cut her off. Heads turned as Braden burst into the room, tablet in hand. He caught my eye and gestured urgently. Excuse me, I murmured, extracting myself from the family circle. In the hallway, Braden thrust the tablet at me. You need to see this. The headline made my blood run cold. Tech CEO Adrian Sutton's divorce takes ugly turn. Insider trading allegations surface. It just broke, Braden said quietly. Natasha's claiming she has evidence he was trading on non-public information. Through the banquet room doors, I could hear Adrian's loud laughter. The merger's going to make us millions. To success. This changes everything, I said, scanning the article. If these allegations are true… That's not all. Braden swiped to another page. Look who's representing him. Jesus Thompson's name jumped out at me. The same Jesus Thompson who'd tried to poach my biggest client last year, who dismissed me as that public defender playing at corporate law. Perfect, I muttered. Just perfect. My phone vibrated, Reese calling. I answered on the first ring. Tell me you've seen the news, she said without preamble. I'm looking at it now. The insider trading allegations. Change everything, she finished. Listen, Eliana, I know he's your brother, but this case just got a lot bigger. If you want to recuse yourself… No, my voice was firm. I'm staying on. Through the doors, I could hear Adrian holding court. My sister? Oh, she means well, but some people just aren't cut out for the big leagues. Public defenders are important, I guess. But let's be honest. It's where lawyers go when they can't hack it in the real world. Braden touched my arm. You okay? I handed him back the tablet, straightening my shoulders. You know what the funny thing is? 5 years ago, when Reese offered me the job, Adrian told me I'd never survive in corporate law. Said I didn't have the killer instinct. And now? Now he's about to find out just how wrong he was. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Mom. Monday morning's meeting should be interesting. Speaking of which, Braden grinned, what are you going to wear? Something expensive, I said, pushing open the banquet room doors. Very, very expensive. Adrian's voice carried across the room. To my incredible success. And to my sister, bless her heart, still fighting the good fight in her little public defender's office. I raised my glass in his direction, smiling. In less than 48 hours, his world would implode. And I would be there to watch it happen. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. I stood in the courthouse, adjusting my crimson Chanel suit, while Reese reviewed our notes one final time. The Morrison case is straightforward, she said. Just don't let opposing counsel rattle you. I smiled, thinking of the much bigger confrontation looming later that day. When do they ever? The courtroom doors opened, and I strode in with the confidence that came from years of victories. 2 hours later, the judge's gavel fell with a satisfying crack. Motion granted in favor of the plaintiff, she announced. Outside the courtroom, Reese squeezed my shoulder. Brilliant work. Now, are you ready for this afternoon? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Adrian's name flashed on the screen, along with a text. Meeting with my hotshot lawyers today. Gonna crush this divorce thing. Wish you had the skills to see a real lawyer in action. Oh, I'll have a front row seat, I muttered. Ms. Sutton? Our assistant appeared, looking nervous. Natasha Evans is here for your 11 o'clock. I found Natasha waiting in my office, perfectly put together in designer clothes that Adrian had probably bought her. She stood when I entered, extending her hand. I had no idea you were... She gestured vaguely. Adrian always said that I was a struggling public defender, I finished, gesturing for her to sit. Yes, he likes that story. I'm sorry, she said quietly. If I'd known you were his sister, I wouldn't have... Stop. I held up a hand. You hired this firm because we're the best. My relationship with Adrian doesn't change that. Reese entered, carrying a thick file. Let's talk about these insider trading allegations. Natasha's perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. I found the emails 3 months ago. He was using information from board meetings to tip off investors. The merger. It's not what everyone thinks. Does he know you have this evidence? I asked. No. She pulled out her phone, showing us a series of screenshots. He thinks I'm just after the money. He has no idea. That he could go to prison, Reese finished. My stomach twisted. As much as Adrian deserved to be taken down a peg, this was serious. Have you shown these to anyone else? Just my friend at the SEC, Natasha said. She's the one who told me to get a lawyer. A knock interrupted us. Braden poked his head in. Sorry to interrupt, but Jesus Thompson is here. He's early for the 2 o'clock and making a scene in reception. Of course he is, I muttered. Natasha, would you excuse us? In the reception area, Jesus Thompson stood in an expensive Italian suit, radiating arrogance. Where's Campbell? I'm not dealing with associates today. Actually, I stepped forward, you'll be dealing with me. He looked me up and down dismissively. And you are? Eliana Sutton, managing partner for this case. His eyes narrowed. Sutton? Any relation to the client you're representing? Yes. I smiled coldly. Shall we move this to the conference room? Jesus' face reddened. This is a conflict of interest. I'll have you disbarred. You'll do nothing of the sort, Reese said, appearing beside me. We've already cleared it with the ethics board. Now, shall we discuss the terms of your client's surrender, or would you like to continue making threats? The elevator dinged. Adrian stepped out, his usual smirk freezing when he saw me. Eliana? He looked between me and Jesus. What are you doing here? Working, I said simply. Conference room 3 is this way. Adrian grabbed Jesus' arm. What's going on? Why is my sister here? Because, I turned to face him fully, I'm the partner handling your wife's divorce case. Surprise. The color drained from his face. But, you're a public defender. No, Adrian. I'm the lawyer you always claimed I couldn't be. I gestured to the conference room. Now, let's discuss those insider trading allegations, shall we? What allegations? He stumbled slightly. This is ridiculous. Jesus, do something. Yeah, actually, Reese interjected. Perhaps we should start with the evidence Natasha provided. The emails make for fascinating reading. Adrian's swagger evaporated. Emails? What emails? I opened the conference room door, enjoying the way his hand shook as he reached for his phone. All will be explained. Please, take a seat. Mom's going to hear about this, he threatened weakly. Oh, I'm counting on it. I placed a thick folder on the table. Now, about those stock trades you made last quarter. The door closed behind us with a soft click, and for the first time in our lives, Adrian looked at me with something new in his eyes. Fear. You can't do this to me! Adrian's voice cracked as he paced my office later that evening. I'm your brother! Exactly, my brother who spent years mocking my career choices. I remained seated behind my desk, watching him unravel. How does it feel to know your struggling public defender sister holds your future in her hands? Mom called me 6 times during that meeting, he said, running his hands through his hair. What am I supposed to tell her? The truth might be refreshing. The door opened, and Braden entered with 2 cups of coffee, stopping short when he saw Adrian. "Sorry, I didn't realize—" "No, stay," I said, accepting the coffee. Adrian was just leaving. "This isn't over," Adrian snapped, storming out. Braden settled into the chair across from me. "That went well." "He didn't even acknowledge the insider trading evidence," I said, rubbing my temples. "Just kept sputtering about betrayal and family loyalty." Speaking of family," Braden nodded toward my phone, which was lighting up with another call from Mom. I answered on speaker. "Hi, Mom." "Eliana Marie Sutton." Her voice filled the office. "How could you ambush your brother like this? He's devastated." "Devastated that he got caught," I corrected. "Did he tell you about the illegal stock trades?" That's just business," she faltered. "You don't understand how these things work." "Actually, Mom, I understand perfectly. It's literally my job to understand." "A job you never told us about?" She paused, and I could picture her pacing her kitchen. "All these years, letting us think. Why didn't you tell us?" "Would it have mattered? Adrian made sure everyone saw me as a failure. You never questioned his version of events." "That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is watching my brother commit securities fraud while mocking my career choices." I caught Braden's supportive nod. "The evidence is solid, Mom. He's in serious trouble." "Then help him. You're his sister." "I'm also an officer of the court. What he did was illegal." The line went quiet for a moment. "Your father would be so disappointed in you." The words hit like a physical blow. Braden reached across the desk, but I waved him off. "Dad taught us about integrity," I said quietly. "About doing what's right, even when it's hard." I wonder what he'd think about Adrian's choices. She hung up without responding. "You okay?" Braden asked. Before I could answer, my assistant Sarah buzzed in. "Ms. Sutton, Natasha Evans is here again. She says it's urgent." Natasha burst in before I could respond, clutching her phone. "He's threatening to expose my past. Says if I don't drop the case, he'll tell everyone about my DUI from college." "Let me see," I said, taking her phone. Adrian's text messages were a desperate mix of threats and pleading. "Drop the case or everyone learns about your mistake. Think about your reputation. I'll destroy you." Classic Adrian, I muttered, always attacking when he's cornered. "Can he do this?" Natasha's hands trembled. "No," I said firmly. "This is witness intimidation. We can add it to the pile." My phone buzzed again. Jesus Thompson calling. I put it on speaker. "Your brother's willing to deal," he said without preamble. "Full financial settlement. Natasha gets what she wants. We just need the insider trading evidence destroyed." "That's not happening," I replied. "The SEC's already involved." "Think about your family, Eliana. Once this goes public, are you actually suggesting I commit a felony to help cover up another felony?" I interrupted. "Careful, Jesus. That could get us both disbarred." He hung up with a curse. Braden leaned forward. "What's your play here?" I looked at Natasha, then back at the mounting evidence on my desk. "We push forward. Adrian needs to learn actions have consequences." "He'll never forgive you," Natasha said softly. "Maybe, but I'll never forgive myself if I let him continue thinking he's above the law." My phone lit up with another text from Adrian. "Final chance, sis. Back off or this gets ugly. You're not the only one with secrets." I showed it to Braden, who whistled low. "He's desperate." "Good," I said, reaching for my briefcase. "That means we're winning." "Where are you going?" Natasha asked. "To see my mother." I stood, straightening my jacket. It's time she learned who her children really are. As I headed for the elevator, Braden called after me. "What if Adrian's right? What if this destroys your family?" I turned back, thinking of all the years of mockery, the dismissive comments, the constant belittling of my choices. "Some things," I said quietly, "need to be destroyed before they can be rebuilt." The elevator doors closed, and I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. Adrian had always accused me of lacking killer instinct. He was about to learn just how wrong he'd been. The pre-settlement conference room felt like a pressure cooker. Adrian sat across the table, flanked by Jesus, and another attorney I didn't recognize. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by dark circles under his eyes and a slightly rumpled collar. "Before we begin," Jesus announced, "my client has prepared a statement." "Save it," Reese cut in. "We're here to discuss numbers and criminal liability." Adrian's head snapped up. "Criminal liability? This is a divorce settlement." "It was," I said, sliding a folder across the table, "until we found these." The new attorney, a nervous-looking man named Paul, opened the folder and blanched. "Mr. Thompson, a word?" They huddled in whispered conversation, while Adrian stared at me, his face a mix of anger and fear. "What did you give them?" "Everything," Natasha answered from beside me. "The emails, the phone records, the offshore accounts." "You vindictive bit." "Choose your next words carefully," I interrupted. "They're being recorded." Jesus returned to the table, his confidence visibly shaken. "We need to discuss parameters." "Parameters?" Reese laughed. "Your client committed securities fraud. The SEC has been notified. The only parameters we're discussing are how much prison time he's facing." "Prison?" Adrian's voice cracked. "Eliana, you can't be serious. We're family." "Funny how you only remember that when you need something." The door opened and my assistant entered with a note. I read it and felt my stomach drop. "Mom's in the lobby," I announced. "She's demanding to be let in." Adrian's face lit up with hope. "Yes, let her in. She'll talk sense into you." I nodded to my assistant, and moments later, Mom swept in wearing her best fixing things outfit. "This has gone far enough," she declared. "Eliana, you're dropping this case immediately." "Actually," Reese interjected, "she's not." "And who are you two?" "I'm the founding partner of this firm," Reese stood. "And your daughter is one of our most valuable partners. She's not going anywhere." Mom's perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. "Partner." "Surprise," I said dryly. "Turns out the struggling public defender did okay for herself." "But..." Mom sank into an empty chair. All this time," I confirmed. "I let Adrian spin his little narrative because it was easier than fighting it. But now?" I turned to my brother. "Now you've crossed a line that family can't fix." "The SEC will be here in 20 minutes, Reese added. "Last chance for a deal." Jesus leaned over to whisper in Adrian's ear. My brother's face went through a rapid series of emotions before settling on defeat. "What are your terms?" he asked quietly. "Full financial disclosure," I began. "Natasha gets 70% of all assets. You admit to the insider trading, cooperate with the SEC investigation, and take whatever plea deal they offer." "That's insane!" Mom protested. "Adrian, don't you dare!" "Mom!" Adrian's voice was hollow. "Stop! She has everything. The emails, the trades, the shell companies. She has it all. But she's your sister. She can't testify against you." "That's spousal privilege, Mom," I corrected. "Siblings can absolutely testify against each other, and I will." The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, Adrian reached for the settlement papers with a shaking hand. "You've won," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You've finally proven you're better than me." "Happy?" "This was never about being better than you," I replied. "It was about being better than what you thought I was." He signed the papers without another word. Mom started crying quietly. "The SEC agents will want to speak with you next," Reese informed him. "I suggest you cooperate fully. It might mean the difference between 5 years and 10. Adrian stood on unsteady legs. "I need some air before they arrive." "Don't even think about running," Jesus warned. "It'll only make things worse." As Adrian headed for the door, he paused beside my chair. "For what it's worth," he said softly, "I was wrong about you. You're not just a killer lawyer, you're ruthless." "No," I corrected him. "I'm just not afraid of you anymore." He nodded once and left. Mom followed, pausing only to say, "I hope this was worth destroying our family." After they were gone, Natasha touched my arm. "Thank you for everything." I watched through the conference room windows as Adrian waited by the elevators, shoulders slumped, his whole world crumbling around him. The brother who had tormented me for years now looked small and broken. "You okay?" Reese asked quietly. "Ask me again when this is over," I replied, gathering my papers. "The SEC will be here soon. Let's finish this." The elevator dinged, and I watched Adrian step inside, disappearing behind closing doors. It felt like the end of something, but also, maybe, the beginning of something else. Something true. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Tech CEO faces securities fraud charges, splashed across every financial website, accompanied by Adrian's corporate headshot. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. "Your brother's asking to see you," Braden said, appearing in my doorway. "He's in the building's lobby." I found Adrian sitting alone on a leather bench, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His designer suit was replaced by khakis and a wrinkled polo shirt. "They froze my accounts," he said without looking up. "All of them." "That's standard procedure in fraud cases. Jesus dropped me as a client." He laughed bitterly. "Said I'm too toxic now. Mom's not answering my calls. Even my doorman looked at me differently this morning." "What do you want, Adrian?" He finally met my eyes. "Help me fix this." "It's too late for that." "Is it?" He stood, desperation clear in his voice. "You're the best lawyer I know. Yes, I can admit that now. There has to be something. The only thing left is to cooperate fully and hope for leniency." I crossed my arms. "The evidence is overwhelming. Because my wife betrayed me. Because my sister. Because you broke the law." I cut him off, repeatedly and deliberately. "This isn't about betrayal. It's about consequences." The lobby security guard was watching us nervously. Adrian noticed and deflated slightly. "You know what the worst part is?" he said quietly. "All those years I spent mocking you, you were becoming everything I pretended to be. Successful, respected, powerful. You didn't just mock me, Adrian. You actively tried to diminish me. Every family gathering, every holiday, every chance you got. Because I was jealous." The words exploded out of him, echoing through the lobby. "You were always the smart one, the driven one, Dad's favorite. Dad's been gone for 15 years. And you're still trying to make him proud while I'm—" He gestured vaguely at himself. "This." The elevator dinged, and Reese stepped out, followed by 2 SEC agents I recognized from yesterday's interviews. "Mr. Sutton," one of them called. "We have some follow-up questions." Adrian's shoulders slumped. "I suppose this is karma." "No," I said. "This is justice. There's a difference." "Miss Sutton," the other agent nodded to me. "We'll need to speak with you as well." "Of course." I turned back to Adrian. "Get a good criminal defense attorney. Not a flashy one, a competent one. I can recommend several." "You're still looking out for me," he said wonderingly. "After everything. You're still my brother. That doesn't mean I'll save you from your own choices." The agents led Adrian toward a conference room, but he paused at the door. "Hey, Eliana, remember when we were kids and I pushed you off your bike? You said I'd never learn to ride it anyway. But you did. The next day you got right back on. I should have known then that you'd always prove me wrong." The conference room door closed behind him, and Reese appeared at my side. "Your mother's giving interviews," she said softly, "claiming you manipulated the evidence to destroy your brother." "Of course she is." I checked my phone. 5 missed calls from Mom, and a text. "How could you do this to our family? The partners want to release a statement," Reese continued. "Show our support for you." "No." I watched through the glass as Adrian slumped in his chair, answering the agent's questions. "Let the evidence speak for itself." My phone buzzed again. Natasha this time. "Just saw the news. Are you okay?" Before I could respond, the elevator opened and Jesus Thompson strode out, heading straight for me. You've made a powerful enemy, he growled. Threatening opposing counsel? I raised an eyebrow. That's a bold choice for someone facing potential conspiracy charges. His face reddened. I had no knowledge of— Save it for the ethics board, Reese interrupted. I believe they're very interested in your involvement. Jesus stormed off, nearly colliding with Braden, who was approaching with coffee. Your mom's on line 1, he said, handing me a cup. Again, let it ring. I watched Adrian through the conference room window, remembering all the times he'd torn me down, all the years of subtle and not so subtle jabs. Was it worth it? Braden asked quietly. In the conference room, Adrian buried his face in his hands as the agents presented more evidence. Through the glass, I could see his shoulders shaking. Ask me in 10 years, I replied, turning away from the window. Right now, I have work to do. My phone buzzed one final time. A text from Mom. Your father would be ashamed. I typed back 3 words before silencing my phone. No, he wouldn't. Then I straightened my jacket and headed back to my office, leaving my brother to face the consequences of his choices, just as I had faced mine all those years ago. The courtroom fell silent as I approached the podium. Adrian sat at the defendant's table, his new attorney, a competent, no-nonsense woman named Rachel, beside him. 3 months had passed since the scandal broke, and today would determine his fate. Your Honor, I began, I'm here today not as the defendant's sister, but as counsel for Natasha Evans, whose divorce settlement is intrinsically linked to these criminal proceedings. The judge nodded. Proceed, Ms. Sutton. The evidence before you shows a clear pattern of securities fraud spanning 3 years. I gestured to the exhibits displayed on the courtroom screens. Mr. Sutton didn't just break the law. He built his entire business model around breaking it. Adrian wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom sat in the back row, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. The defense claims these were isolated incidents, I continued. Mistakes made under pressure. The evidence tells a different story. Rachel stood. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is editorializing. Overruled. Continue, Ms. Sutton. I pulled up the email chain that had started everything. This exchange from March clearly shows premeditation. Quote, the board doesn't know yet. Buy now before the announcement. Delete this email. Adrian flinched. In the gallery, I heard Mom's sharp intake of breath. The prosecution has already established criminal liability, I said. I'm here to ensure that the civil penalties reflect the scope of the damage. My client's entire marriage was built on fraudulent gains. Your Honor, Rachel interrupted, Ms. Sutton's personal relationship with the defendant creates an obvious conflict, which was reviewed and approved by the ethics board, I countered. My relationship with the defendant gives me unique insight into the pattern of deception. The judge leaned forward. Are you prepared to testify to that effect, Ms. Sutton? I am. I turned to face Adrian directly. For years, I watched my brother manipulate facts to serve his narrative. He convinced our entire family I was a failure while he committed federal crimes. The pattern is clear. Objection! Rachel stood again. Counsel is testifying. Sustained. The judge frowned. Stay on point, Ms. Sutton. I nodded, pulling up the financial records. The defendant's actions resulted in over $12 million in fraudulent gains. The proposed settlement of 70% to Ms. Evans is more than fair. It represents only the legitimate portions of their joint assets. Adrian whispered something to Rachel, who shook her head sharply. Furthermore, I continued, we ask the court to consider these civil penalties in conjunction with the criminal charges. Mr. Sutton's cooperation, while late, has been helpful in identifying other participants in the scheme. Jesus Thompson, sitting in the back near Mom, shifted uncomfortably. The SEC's investigation is ongoing, I concluded, but the damage to innocent investors is clear. We ask the court to approve the settlement as structured. The judge reviewed her notes. Ms. Rachel, your response? Adrian's attorney rose. Your Honor, while we don't contest the basic facts, we believe Ms. Sutton's personal vendetta. Objection, Reese called from our table. Sustained, the judge said. Counsel, stick to the settlement terms. Rachel adjusted her approach. We request a more equitable distribution, considering my client's cooperation. His cooperation came only after he was caught, I interrupted, and only after attempting to intimidate witnesses. The judge held up her hand. I've heard enough. Based on the evidence presented, I'm approving the settlement as structured. Mr. Sutton, please rise. Adrian stood on shaky legs. The civil penalties in this case will be addressed separately from your criminal sentencing next week, she continued. But let me be clear. Your attempts to blame family dynamics for your criminal behavior are not persuasive. Your Honor, Rachel started. No. The judge's voice was firm. The evidence is overwhelming. The settlement stands. She banged her gavel. Court adjourned. As people began filing out, Adrian turned to me. Happy now? No, I replied honestly. But it's done. Mom approached, her face tight with anger. I hope you're satisfied, destroying your brother's life for some petty revenge. Mom! Adrian's voice was tired. Stop! She didn't destroy anything. I did this to myself. The admission seemed to shock her into silence. Reese appeared at my elbow. SEC wants to talk to us about Thompson's involvement. I nodded, gathering my files. As I turned to leave, Adrian called after me. Hey, sis! His voice cracked slightly. Remember when we were kids and you wanted to be a superhero? What about it? You said you wanted to fight for justice. He smiled sadly. Guess you got your wish. I watched as the bailiff led him away, Mom trailing behind them, still clutching her handbag. The courtroom emptied until only Reese and I remained. You okay? She asked. Ask me after his criminal sentencing next week. I straightened my jacket. Right now, we have more work to do. We walked out together, leaving behind the echoes of family bonds, broken and reformed in the pursuit of justice. Sometimes, I realized, being a hero meant making the hardest choices, even when they hurt the ones we love. The prison visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Adrian sat across from me in his beige jumpsuit, looking smaller than I remembered. 3 years into his 5-year sentence, this was only our second visit. You cut your hair, he said by way of greeting. You grew a beard. I gestured to his face. It suits you. Not much choice in here. He fidgeted with his sleeve. Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you would. Your letter was convincing. He nodded, glancing around the room where other inmates visited with family. Mom finally stopped sending money to my commissary account. I know. She called me about it. Really? His eyebrows shot up. You two are talking again? We had lunch last week. I smiled slightly. She admitted she might have been wrong about a few things. Adrian leaned forward, lowering his voice. Is it true what I heard about Jesus Thompson? 15 years? 17. Turns out he was running schemes with half a dozen other clients. Your cooperation helped bring that to light. Karma's a bitch, he muttered, then caught himself. Sorry, I'm trying to be better about everything. The prison therapist you mentioned in your letter, she's helping? Dr. Chen. He nodded. She's the one who suggested I reach out to you, said I needed to stop blaming others for my choices. A guard walked past, and we fell silent until he passed. I saw your name in the paper, Adrian said. That big civil rights case you won? You're following my cases? Every one I can find. He smiled weakly. Turns out the prison library gets all the major papers. I've become quite the legal scholar. Better late than never. Yeah. He rubbed his face. Listen, I've been practicing what to say to you for months. Can I just... I nodded. I was jealous, he said simply. Not just of your success, but of your integrity. You knew who you were, what you stood for. I was so busy trying to look successful that I forgot to actually be good at anything real. Adrian, let me finish. He held up a hand. What I did was wrong. Not just the fraud, but how I treated you. All those years of putting you down, making you feel small. I did it because I felt small, and I'm sorry. The words hung between us, heavy with decades of history. Natasha got remarried, I said finally. I know, to that kindergarten teacher. He smiled genuinely. Good for her. She deserves to be happy. A bell rang, signaling the end of visiting hours. Before you go, Adrian said quickly, I have something for you. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Made it in the woodshop here. It was a carefully drawn blueprint for a bicycle, the same model I'd learned to ride on after he pushed me off. Thought maybe, he hesitated, maybe when I get out, I could build one. For your kid. I stared at him. How did you know I was… Mom mentioned you've been sick in the mornings. He shrugged. I can do math. I haven't told anyone at work yet. Secret's safe with me. He stood as the guard approached. For what it's worth, you're going to be an amazing mother. You always were better at taking care of people than I was. I tucked the blueprint into my bag. You know, they have a law library here. Yeah? Could always use some pro bono help with research, if you're interested. His face lit up. Really? You said you're following my cases. Might as well make yourself useful. The guard cleared his throat. Time's up. Adrian nodded. Thank you for coming, for listening, for everything. That's what big sisters do. No, he said seriously. That's what good people do. I'm just sorry it took me so long to see that. As I gathered my things, he called after me. Hey, Eliana. Yeah? When the baby comes, will you tell them about me? I turned back. I'll tell them their uncle is learning to be brave enough to face the truth. That sometimes the hardest victories are the ones we win over ourselves. Still talking like a lawyer, he smiled. Still your sister, I replied. Walking out of the prison, I placed a hand on my stomach, thinking about cycles breaking and new beginnings. My phone buzzed, Braden reminding me about tomorrow's deposition. The world of justice and consequences continued turning, but something had shifted, like a broken bone finally setting right. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but understanding. Sometimes that's enough of a victory to build a future on. I took one last look at the prison before getting in my car. The blueprint in my bag felt like a promise, not of perfection, but of possibility. Sometimes that's all any of us can ask for. That and the courage to keep pedaling forward, no matter how many times we fall.
The rain pelted against the church windows as I watched my sister Freya stand at our father's casket, dabbing her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery bill. My name is Olive, and this was the day my sister stole everything from me. Daddy would have wanted the estate in capable hands, Freya announced to our small gathering of family and close friends. Her voice carried that familiar patronizing tone I'd grown to despise. As the eldest, I'll ensure our family's legacy remains intact. I gripped the wooden pew until my knuckles turned white. Just yesterday, we'd buried our father, and already she was making her move. Mom sat beside me, her grief-stricken face buried in her hands, as she nodded along to everything Freya said. Olive, dear. Freya's saccharine voice cut through my thoughts. You understand, don't you? With your history of impulsive decisions, this is really for the best. The gathered mourners turned to look at me. I felt their stares burning into my skin. Remembering the rumors Freya had carefully cultivated about my supposed irresponsibility. That failed startup I'd attempted at 23. The time I'd traveled through Europe instead of immediately starting college. All twisted into weapons against me. I understand perfectly, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. You've always had everything figured out, haven't you, Freya? She smiled, that picture-perfect smile that had fooled everyone but me. I'm so glad you see it my way. Mom's already signed over power of attorney to me. It's all very official. My head snapped toward Mom. Is this true? Mom finally looked up, her eyes red and puffy. Freya knows what she's doing, honey. She's got the business degree, the connections. Your father would have wanted… Dad would have wanted us to share everything equally, I interrupted, standing up. That's why he left it to both of us in his will. Freya's friend Callie stepped forward, placing a manicured hand on my shoulder. Olive, sweetie, maybe you should step outside and get some air. Grief can make us say such irrational things. I shrugged her hand off and walked toward the church exit. As I pushed open the heavy wooden doors, I heard Freya's voice carry across the now silent church. You're better off without it, little sister. Trust me. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by boxes I'd already packed. The estate had been in our family for generations. The mansion, the investments, the land. Dad had built it into something remarkable, and now Freya would run it all into the ground. A soft knock at my door made me look up. Mom stood there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I'm sorry, Olive, she whispered. But Freya, she knows what she's doing. She's got everything planned out. She's manipulating you, Mom. Can't you see that? Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Mom's voice cracked. Please, I can't handle any more conflict right now. I stood up and hugged her, breathing in her familiar lavender scent. It's okay, Mom. I understand. And I did understand. Not just Mom's grief, but what I needed to do next. Freya thought she'd won, thought she'd pushed me aside like she always had. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. Again. Later that night, as I loaded the last box into my car, I heard heels clicking on the driveway behind me. Running away again, Freya called out. I knew you'd take the easy way out. I turned to face her, and for the first time in years, I felt completely calm. No, Freya, I'm not running away. I'm moving forward. She laughed, the sound echoing in the empty driveway. Forward to what? Another failed venture? Another disappointment? You know what's funny? I smiled, closing my trunk. You're so focused on what you've gained. You have no idea what you've just lost. Lost? She scoffed. I've won everything. Keep telling yourself that. I got into my car and started the engine. Through the window, I added, and Freya, remember this moment. Remember exactly how it feels to think you've won. It'll make what comes next so much sweeter. As I drove away from my childhood home, I watched Freya's figure shrink in my rearview mirror. She thought she'd written the final chapter of our story. But she was wrong. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. And I was going to make sure she regretted every single moment of her victory. 6 months into my new life in the city, I found myself sitting across from Gregory in his downtown office, surrounded by financial reports and investment portfolios. The view of the skyline behind him seemed to mock my small-town roots, but I wasn't here to admire the scenery. You're a quick study, Olive, Gregory said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed my latest analysis. Most people take years to grasp these concepts. I took a sip of my coffee, hiding my smile. Most people aren't trying to save their family legacy from a manipulative sister. Speaking of which, Gregory turned his computer screen toward me. Have you seen the latest news about your family's company? The headline made my stomach turn. Carter Industries announces aggressive expansion plans. Below it was a photo of Freya, wearing her signature pearls and fake smile. She's taking out loans she can't possibly repay, I muttered, scanning the article. The estate's cash flow won't support this kind of expansion. Exactly. Gregory leaned back in his chair. She's playing a dangerous game. One wrong move and... A knock at the door interrupted us. A tall man in a crisp suit entered, his presence immediately commanding attention. Sorry to interrupt, he said, his eyes meeting mine. I'm Russell O'Connor. I couldn't help overhearing. Did you say Carter Industries? I straightened in my chair. I did. I'm Olive. Recognition flickered across his face. Olive Carter, I've been following your family's case, the inheritance dispute. You could call it that, I replied carefully, though theft might be more accurate. Russell pulled up a chair, his interest piqued. I'm a corporate lawyer. I've seen similar cases before, but yours, there's something not quite right about how it was handled. Gregory cleared his throat. Russell's one of the best in the business, Olive. If anyone can help you build a case, it's him. I studied Russell's face, looking for any sign of the usual condescension I'd faced when telling my story. Instead, I found genuine concern and something else: determination. "Tell me everything," Russell said, pulling out a notepad. "Start with the power of attorney transfer." For the next hour, I laid out every detail, every manipulation Freya had orchestrated. Russell's pen moved rapidly across the page, occasionally stopping to ask pointed questions. "Your sister's making mistakes," he finally said, tapping his pen against the notepad. "Big ones. These expansion plans. They're reckless at best, fraudulent at worst." "Can we prove it?" I asked, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "Not yet, but we can start building a case. Gregory's been teaching you finance. That knowledge will be crucial." I glanced at my watch and stood up. "I have class in 20 minutes. Business Management 301. "You're taking classes too?" Russell looked impressed. "Every single one I can fit in," I replied, gathering my things. Freya's biggest argument was that I lacked the knowledge to run the estate. I'm making sure that when I face her again, she won't have any ammunition left. Russell stood as well, holding out his business card. "Let's meet next week. We'll need to start documenting everything." As I reached for the card, our fingers brushed briefly. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through me, and I quickly pulled away. "Thanks," I mumbled, shoving the card into my bag. "Both of you. I know this isn't exactly a normal client situation." Gregory waved off my thanks. "Normal is overrated. Besides, watching you take down your sister will be payment enough." Outside, the city bustled with its usual afternoon energy. As I waited for my ride share, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Freya's throwing a charity gala next month. Please come home for it. We miss you." I stared at the message, my throat tight. Below it was a photo of Mom and Freya at our family estate. Standing in front of the rose garden Dad had lovingly tended for years. The roses were wilting now, their care clearly neglected. Another text came through, this time from Russell. "Forgot to mention, those charity galas are perfect for gathering intel. Might be worth making an appearance." I smiled, typing back, "Already got my invitation." The rideshare pulled up, and as I settled into the back seat, I pulled out my tablet to review my class notes. Every formula I memorized, every concept I mastered, was another step closer to taking back what was mine. Freya thought she'd won by forcing me to leave, but she'd actually given me exactly what I needed: the freedom to become someone she'd never see coming. The sister she'd dismissed as irresponsible was gone. In her place was someone much more dangerous, someone with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The country club's bathroom wasn't where I'd expected to find my first real breakthrough. But there I was, reapplying lipstick, when Callie stumbled in, clearly 3 glasses of champagne past her limit. "Olive," she caught herself on the marble counter. "I didn't know you'd be at the gala." I capped my lipstick, watching her in the mirror. "Mom invited me. Couldn't miss another one of Freya's famous charity events, could I?" Callie's perfectly made-up face crumpled slightly. "God, these events. Do you know how exhausting it is, keeping up with all the lies?" "Lies?" I turned to face her, keeping my voice casual. "What do you mean?" She glanced around the empty bathroom, lowering her voice. "The donations, the numbers, nothing adds up anymore. Freya keeps saying everything's fine, but..." She hiccuped. "Last week, she asked me to help her move some money around. Said it was normal business practice, but it felt wrong." Before I could press further, the bathroom door swung open. Freya stood there, her designer dress practically radiating artificial perfection. "Callie, darling." Freya's voice could have frozen hell over. "The mayor's asking for you." Callie straightened up, her moment of honesty vanishing behind a practiced smile. As she wobbled out, Freya turned to me. "Enjoying the party, little sister?" "Immensely," I replied, pulling out my phone. "Just documenting all the wonderful charitable work you're doing." Her eyes narrowed at my phone. "Still bitter, I see. You know, Mom's worried about you, living alone in the city, working yourself to death with all those classes. Is she? Funny how she never mentions that in our weekly calls. Freya's perfect smile faltered for a split second. You talk to Mom weekly? Oh, yes. We've gotten quite close lately. Amazing what honest communication can do for a relationship. Outside the bathroom, the string quartet started playing one of Dad's favorite songs. Freya's face softened for a moment, showing a glimpse of genuine emotion. Dad would have loved this, she said quietly. Would he? I challenged. Would he have loved watching you run his company into the ground, with reckless expansions and mismanaged funds? The softness vanished. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? The third quarter reports tell an interesting story, Freya. So do the whispers I'm hearing about bounced checks and delayed payments. She grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my skin. Stay out of this, Olive. You gave up your right to question my decisions when you left. When I left, I yanked my arm free. You mean when you forced me out? Is everything okay in here? Mom's voice made us both jump. She stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. Everything's fine, Mom, Freya said smoothly. Olive was just leaving, weren't you? I looked at Mom, seeing the conflict in her eyes. Actually, I'd love to stay and chat about the company's financial reports. Mom, did you know about the... Mom doesn't need to worry about boring financial details. Freya cut in sharply. She trusts me to handle everything. Mom wrung her hands. Freya's right, honey. She knows what she's doing. The expansion plans they're going well, aren't they, Freya? Of course they are, Freya assured her. Everything's perfect. I pulled out Russell's business card and held it out to Mom. When you're ready to know the truth, call this number. He's a lawyer who specializes in corporate fraud. That's enough. Freya snatched the card from my hand and tore it in half. Mom, go back to the party. I need to talk to my sister alone. But Mom didn't move. She stared at the torn card on the floor, then at Freya's flushed face, then at me. Fraud? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. What is she talking about, Freya? Nothing, Freya snapped. She's just trying to cause trouble, like always. I pulled another card from my purse. The truth will come out eventually, Freya. The only question is how much damage you'll do before it does. Leaving the card on the counter, I walked out of the bathroom, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Behind me, I heard Mom ask again, Freya, what is going on? My phone buzzed with a text from Russell. Got the documents you needed. Meet tomorrow? I smiled, typing back a quick yes as I made my way through the glittering crowd. Freya might have won the battle for Mom's trust months ago, but watching her perfect facade crack tonight told me everything I needed to know. The war was far from over, and her defenses were beginning to crumble. Russell's office was a maze of papers when I arrived the next morning. Gregory was already there, poring over financial statements with a furrowed brow. You're not going to believe what we found, Russell said, not even looking up from his computer. His tie was loosened, and coffee cups littered his desk. Your sister's been busy. I dropped into the chair beside him. Define busy. How about 3 shell companies, 2 unauthorized loans, and 1 very interesting offshore account? Gregory slid a folder across the desk. She's been siphoning money from the estate for months. My hand shook as I opened the folder. Can we prove it? Thanks to your drunk friend Callie last night, yes. Russell finally looked up, dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he'd been here all night. Those transactions she mentioned, they left a trail, a messy one. Speaking of messy, Gregory interrupted, holding up his phone. Your sister just announced another expansion project. She's burning through capital like it's unlimited. I scanned the announcement on his phone. This is insane. She's going to bankrupt the company at this rate. That's not the worst part, Russell said, turning his screen toward me. Look at the fine print on these loan documents. As I read, my blood ran cold. She used the estate as collateral, all of it. Everything, Russell confirmed. The house, the land, all of it. One default, and it's gone. But that's illegal, I protested. She needed my signature for that kind of decision. Russell's eyes lit up. Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. He pulled out another document. Look at this signature. I leaned in, studying the paper. That's not my signature. She forged it? Bingo. Russell smiled for the first time that morning. This is our way in. Forgery, fraud, unauthorized use of assets. We've got her. Gregory cleared his throat. There's something else. Your mother called me this morning. My head snapped up. What? After last night, she started asking questions, real questions. She's worried, Olive, and she should be. My phone buzzed. A text from Freya. Family dinner tonight, non-negotiable. Don't make Mom more upset than you already have. Perfect timing, Russell said, reading over my shoulder. Go to dinner. Keep things civil. We need a few more days to get everything in order. Civil? I laughed bitterly. With Freya, think of it as reconnaissance, Gregory suggested. The more comfortable she feels, the more likely she is to slip up. That evening, I pulled up to our family estate. The gardens were even more neglected than before. Dad's beloved roses, almost completely dead now. Inside, the house felt different, colder somehow, despite the summer heat. Olive, Mom rushed to hug me. I'm so glad you came. Of course I came. I hugged her back, noticing how thin she felt. Where's Freya? In Dad's study. She practically lives in there now. I found Freya behind Dad's massive oak desk, surrounded by papers she hastily shoved into a drawer when I entered. Well, she said, leaning back. The prodigal sister returns. Cut the act, Freya. What's really going on with the company? She stood up, smoothing her skirt. Everything's fine, better than fine. We're expanding, growing. Drowning in debt, I finished. How long before the house of cards collapses? You always were dramatic. She walked around the desk. I've got everything under control. Like you had my signature under control. She froze. What? The loan documents, Freya. Did you really think no one would notice the forgery? For a split second, real fear flashed across her face before she masked it with a laugh. You can't prove anything. Can't I? I pulled out my phone, showing her a photo of the document. Funny thing about forgery. It leaves traces. Dinner's ready, Mom called from downstairs. Freya gripped the desk, knuckles white. What do you want? I want what's mine, what Dad wanted me to have. You'll never prove anything, she hissed. And even if you could, you'd destroy Mom in the process. Is that what you want? I headed for the door, pausing in the doorway. You know what's interesting about karma, Freya? It doesn't care about what we want. It only cares about what we deserve. As we sat down to dinner, I watched Freya's hands shake as she lifted her wine glass. She was scared now, and she should be, because tomorrow, Russell would file the first round of papers, and her carefully constructed world would begin to crumble. Mom passed the salad, oblivious to the tension. Isn't this nice? Both my girls home again? I smiled, taking the bowl. Yes, Mom, it's exactly where I need to be. The morning sun streamed through the estate's windows as I walked into Dad's study, where Freya was frantically shredding documents. She looked up, mascara smeared under her eyes. You actually did it, she snarled, waving a legal notice. You're suing me. Not just suing, I replied, closing the door behind me. The police are involved now. Fraud tends to interest them. She slammed the shredder off. You have no idea what you're doing. I built this company up. Built it up? I laughed. You've been destroying it. Look at this. I grabbed a financial report from her desk. 3 missed loan payments. 2 vendors threatening legal action. The expansion projects are hemorrhaging money. I can fix it. She grabbed the paper from my hands. I just need more time. Time for what? To forge more documents? Empty more accounts? The study door creaked open, and Mom stepped in. Neither of us had heard her approach. Is it true? Mom's voice was barely audible. The things they're saying on the news. Freya rushed to her. Mom, don't listen to them. It's all lies. Stop it, I snapped. Just stop lying. Show her the real numbers, Freya. Show her what you've done to Dad's legacy. Mom picked up one of the scattered papers, her hands trembling. These loans, You said they were small business loans. But this is, she looked up, tears in her eyes. You mortgaged everything? I had to. Freya's composure cracked. The initial expansions weren't working. I needed more capital. So you forged my signature? I stepped closer, emptied the trust accounts, created fake charity events to launder money. Charity events. Mom sank into Dad's old leather chair. The Children's Hospital Fund? Freya's face went pale. Mom, I can explain. Explain what? I pulled out my phone, showing them the evidence Russell had compiled. How you pocketed donations, how you've been living off stolen money while the company crumbles. I deserved it, Freya screamed, making us both jump. I was always the responsible one, the one who stayed. While you got to run around Europe, finding yourself, I was here, learning the business. Learning, I scoffed. You were schmoozing and playing politics. I actually studied finance, learned investment strategies. Girls, please. Mom's voice cracked. Your father, Dad would be ashamed, I said quietly. Of both of us. We should have worked together, Freya. That's what he wanted. Freya's laugh was hollow. Work together? You never wanted that. You just wanted your share without earning it. And what did you earn? I gestured around the study. The right to destroy everything he built? To steal from charities? To risk our family home? A knock at the door made us all turn. Russell stood there with 2 police officers. Ms. Freya. One officer stepped forward. We have some questions about certain financial discrepancies. Freya straightened her spine, her mask slipping back into place. My lawyers will handle any questions. Your lawyers dropped you this morning, Russell said, holding up his phone. Something about not wanting to be associated with fraud charges. Mom stood up suddenly. Wait, there must be something we can do. Some way to fix this without... It's too late, Mom, I said gently. The auditors are already here. The board members are calling for a full investigation. Freya's face contorted with rage. You planned this, all of it. The classes, the meetings with lawyers. You've been plotting against me this whole time. No, Freya. I've been preparing to save our family's company from you. The officers moved forward, but Freya held up a hand. Fine. You want the truth? Here it is. She turned to Mom. I took everything. The money, the donations, all of it. Because I could. Because no one was watching. Because perfect, responsible Freya would never do such things. Right? Mom covered her mouth, stifling a sob. And you know what else? Freya continued, her voice rising hysterically. Dad knew. He knew I wasn't ready to run the company. That's why he left it to both of us. But I couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand sharing with perfect little Olive, who always got away with everything. Ma'am, one officer said firmly, we need you to come with us. As they led Freya out, she turned back one last time. I hope you're happy, little sister. You've destroyed this family. No, Freya, I replied, watching her go. You did that all by yourself. Mom and I stood in silence as Freya's heels clicked down the hallway, each step echoing through the house like a final countdown. The empire she'd built on lies was crumbling, but beneath the rubble, our family's true legacy remained. Now came the hard part, rebuilding everything she'd torn down. The boardroom felt like a war zone. Angry investors, concerned board members, and a team of forensic accountants all talked over each other while I stood at the head of the table, my father's old position. The total losses are approaching $8 million, one accountant announced, sliding reports across the table. And that's just what we've uncovered so far. How did no one notice? Demanded Mr. Patterson, our longest-serving board member. Where were the oversight committees? Callie, sitting in the corner, raised her hand timidly. Freya had us all submit false reports. She said it was standard practice for tax purposes. And you believed her? Someone scoffed. Enough, I cut in. Pointing fingers won't solve anything. We need solutions. Russell stood up, straightening his tie. We've managed to freeze the offshore accounts. Some funds can be recovered. The real issue is the expansion projects. They're bleeding us dry, Gregory added, pulling up a spreadsheet on the projector. We need to shut them down immediately. But the contracts, someone started, are void. Russell interrupted. They were signed under fraudulent circumstances. We can legally terminate them. The door burst open, and Mom walked in, looking more determined than I'd seen her in months. I've just come from the bank. I'm selling my vacation house to help cover the immediate debts. Mom, no, I protested. You don't have to. Yes, I do, she said firmly. I let this happen. I trusted blindly when I should have asked questions. Let me help fix it. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. That's admirable, but it won't be enough. We need… Actually, Gregory interrupted. I have some investors interested in helping. They've worked with Olive in some of her recent projects. They're impressed with her financial acumen. I felt all eyes turn to me. The company can be saved, I said, pulling up my own presentation. But we need to act fast and be transparent about everything. For the next hour, I laid out my plan. Cost-cutting measures, restructuring proposals, and most importantly, a complete overhaul of our financial oversight systems. As I spoke, I could see the tension in the room slowly shifting to cautious hope. This could work, Mr. Patterson finally said, but we'll need someone we trust in charge, someone who understands both the business and the family legacy. Before anyone could respond, Callie stood up. I need to say something. Her voice shook. There's more, about Freya. The room fell silent. Callie swallowed hard. She didn't just take company money. She's been blackmailing people, board members, investors, anyone who questioned her. She has files. Where? I demanded. Hidden drive in her personal laptop, password protected. But she pulled out a USB drive. I made a copy, last week, before everything. Russell took the drive. This could help with the criminal case. And explain why nobody stopped her sooner, Gregory added. My phone buzzed. A text from the prison, where Freya was being held, awaiting bail. Your perfect plan worked. Happy now, but remember, little sister, I know secrets too, about everyone, including you. I showed the message to Russell, who smiled grimly. Empty threats. She's done. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Patterson turned to Mom. As majority shareholder, you need to officially appoint a new CEO. Mom stood up, her voice steady. I think we all know who it should be. She turned to me. Your father always said you had his head for business. I should have listened. I'll need help, I said, looking around the room. From all of you. No more secrets, no more hidden agendas. You've got it. Gregory nodded. Where do we start? First, we come clean to everyone. Employees, shareholders, the public. Then we start rebuilding, project by project. As the meeting wrapped up, Mom pulled me aside. I found this in your father's study. She handed me an old envelope. It's dated the week before he died. Inside was a letter, Dad's familiar handwriting slightly shaky. My dear Olive, if you're reading this, things have probably gone wrong. I knew Freya wasn't ready, but I hoped, well, hope isn't enough in business. You have what it takes, the patience to learn, the wisdom to ask for help, and the strength to make hard decisions. The company is yours to save, if you choose to. Love, Dad. I folded the letter carefully as Russell approached. Ready for tomorrow's press conference? Ready, I nodded, tucking the letter into my jacket pocket. Time to tell the world exactly what happened here. And Freya? She'll face justice, I said, watching the last board members file out. But right now, we have a company to save and a legacy to rebuild. The courthouse buzzed with tension as Freya strode in. Designer suit, pristine, despite her circumstances. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, but she waved him off, eyes fixed on me with burning intensity. All rise, the bailiff called out. I gripped Russell's hand under the table before letting go. He'd become more than just my lawyer over these past months, but today wasn't about us. Today was about justice. The state versus Freya, on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and forgery, the judge announced. How does the defendant plead? Freya stood, chin high. Not guilty, Your Honor. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Diana, approached the bench. Your Honor, the state will prove that the defendant systematically defrauded her family's company, embezzled charitable donations, and forged documents to cover her tracks. For hours, witness after witness took the stand. Callie, trembling but determined, detailed years of financial manipulation. Board members described Freya's threats and blackmail. Forensic accountants mapped out the complex web of fraud. Then it was my turn. Ms. Olive, Diana began. When did you first suspect your sister's activities? The day of our father's funeral, I replied, my voice steady. When she announced she was taking control of everything. Objection, Freya's lawyer called out. Relevance. Overruled, the judge said. Continue. I described the months of investigation, the discovery of forged documents, the offshore accounts. As I spoke, I watched Mom in the gallery, tears streaming down her face. And this document, Diana held up the loan agreement. Is this your signature? No, I said firmly. Freya forged it to secure loans, using our family estate as collateral. Freya's lawyer cross-examined me aggressively, trying to paint me as a jealous sister out for revenge. But the evidence was too strong, the paper trail too clear. Then, unexpectedly, Freya stood up. I want to speak, she announced. I want to tell the truth. Her lawyer tried to stop her, but she shrugged him off and walked to the stand. The court fell silent. You want the truth? Freya's voice was razor sharp. The truth is, I did everything they're saying. Every single thing. But you know what? I did it because I could. Because everyone was so busy praising perfect little Olive, they never noticed what I was capable of. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Ms. Freya, the judge warned, you have the right to remain silent. I don't want to remain silent. She turned to face me directly. You think you've won? You think taking over the company makes you Dad's true heir? I took everything he built and turned it into my personal piggy bank. I destroyed his legacy, and that's something you can never undo. Order. The judge banged his gavel. Ms. Freya, return to your seat immediately. But Freya wasn't finished. You want to know the best part? Those charity events, the Children's Hospital Fund, all that money people donated to help sick kids. I spent it on vacations and designer clothes, and I'd do it again. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Mom collapsed into tears. Russell grabbed my hand as I started to rise, holding me back. Your Honor, Diana's voice cut through the noise. The state rests its case. The jury took less than 2 hours to reach a verdict. On all counts, the foreman announced, we find the defendant guilty. Freya stood stone-faced as the judge delivered her sentence. 15 years in prison, full restitution of stolen funds, and a lifetime ban from holding any corporate positions. As the bailiff led her away, she passed close to me. Congratulations, little sister. You've got everything you wanted. I hope you choke on it. No, Freya, I replied quietly. I never wanted this. I just wanted justice. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Russell fielded their questions while Mom and I slipped away to a quiet corner. I should have seen it, Mom whispered. All those years, I should have known. We all should have, I said, hugging her. But now we can rebuild, together. Gregory appeared through the crowd. The board's waiting. They want to make your position as CEO permanent. I looked at Mom, who nodded encouragingly. Go. Your father would be so proud. As we walked to the waiting car, Russell caught up with us. Dinner tonight? To celebrate. I smiled, feeling the weight of the past year finally lifting. Yes, but first, there's something I need to do. That evening, I stood in Dad's study, now my study, looking at his photograph on the wall. We did it, Dad. We saved your legacy. And I promise, I'll make it even stronger. The company would recover. The stolen money would be repaid. But more importantly, the truth had finally come out. Sometimes, karma doesn't just come for those who deserve it. It helps restore what was broken in the process. The autumn breeze rustled through Dad's rose garden, now restored to its former glory. I knelt beside the bushes, pruning shears in hand, just as he'd taught me. The quarterly reports are in, Russell called from the patio, tablet in hand. Profits are up 30%. The Children's Hospital Fund has been fully restored. And the expansion projects, I asked, snipping a wayward branch, all stabilized. Gregory's oversight team is keeping everything on track. The back door opened, and Mom emerged, carrying a tray of lemonade. She looked younger somehow. The weight of secrets finally lifted from her shoulders. Mail came, she said, handing me an envelope. From the prison. I recognized Freya's handwriting immediately. Unlike her previous letters, full of threats and accusations, this one felt different, lighter somehow. Dear Olive, I read aloud. I've had time to think in here. Too much time, probably. Yesterday, they let me watch the news coverage of the company's recovery. You did what I never could. You made it better, stronger. Dad would have. I paused, swallowing hard. Dad would have been proud. Russell sat beside me on the garden bench. Are you going to respond? I don't know, I admitted, folding the letter. Some wounds take longer to heal. Speaking of healing, Mom interjected with a knowing smile. Russell, are you staying for dinner? I'm making your favorite pot roast. He squeezed my hand. Wouldn't miss it. The sound of car tires on gravel drew our attention. Callie emerged from her vehicle, clutching a stack of papers. The last of the restitution paperwork, she announced, joining us in the garden. Every penny has been accounted for and returned to the charities. Thank you, Callie, I said sincerely, for everything. She shook her head. I should have spoken up sooner, but watching you rebuild everything, doing it the right way, it's taught me something about courage. Speaking of courage, Russell cleared his throat, suddenly looking nervous. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, Olive. Before he could continue, Gregory's car pulled up. He practically ran to the garden, waving a document. The board just unanimously approved your proposal, he exclaimed. The Scholarship Foundation for Business Ethics. They love it. I smiled, thinking of Dad. The Redemption Scholarship. For students who understand that success isn't just about profit margins. Your father would have loved that name, Mom said softly, wiping a tear. Actually, I stood up, addressing everyone. There's something else we need to discuss. I've been thinking about the company's future. Russell raised an eyebrow. More changes. More like evolution. We're not just going to be about business anymore. I want to create a mentorship program, helping young entrepreneurs learn ethical business practices. Show them that success and integrity aren't mutually exclusive. That's brilliant, Gregory nodded. A way to prevent another Freya situation. And speaking of prevention, Russell finally managed to pull out a small velvet box from his pocket. I was wondering if you'd be interested in a different kind of partnership. The garden fell silent. Mom's hands flew to her mouth. Callie squealed. Really? I laughed. You're doing this now, in the middle of a business discussion. Well, he grinned. You're always saying we should merge our assets. Oh my God, that was terrible, I groaned. But I was smiling. Yes, of course, yes. As Russell slipped the ring on my finger, I caught sight of Dad's roses, swaying in the breeze. They were blooming again, stronger than ever. So, Gregory cleared his throat, clearly emotional but trying to hide it, about that mentorship program. Right. I straightened up, still grinning. Let's go inside and discuss it. Mom's pot roast is waiting, and we've got work to do. As everyone headed inside, I lingered in the garden for a moment. The estate felt alive again, filled with purpose and hope. Freya's letter crinkled in my pocket, a reminder of how far we'd come and how far we still could go. Coming, Russell called from the patio. Yes, I said, taking one last look at the roses. You know what, Dad? I whispered to the garden. I think we did okay, better than okay. Inside, I could hear laughter and conversation. The sounds of family and future plans mingling together. The company wasn't just surviving anymore, it was thriving, guided by principles stronger than profit margins. And maybe someday, when the wounds had healed enough, there would even be room for forgiveness. But for now, there was dinner to eat, plans to make, and a future to build. The right way this time. After all, isn't that what karma is really about? Not just punishment, but restoration. Making things right again, one choice at a time.
The microphone feels heavy in my hand as I watch my brother Sullivan deliver his best man speech. My fingers trace the smooth metal, and I can already taste the chaos I'm about to unleash. In less than 20 minutes, I'll shatter this perfect wedding reception into 1,000 glittering pieces. My name is Piper, and I'm about to ruin my brother's wedding. To the happy couple, Sullivan raises his champagne glass, and 200 guests follow suit. The crystal chandeliers catch the light, creating dancing patterns across the ballroom's cream-colored walls. My mother Yara dabs at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, the perfect picture of maternal pride. "You okay?" Olive whispers, squeezing my arm under the table. "You look like you're about to throw up." "I'm fine," I lie, gripping the microphone tighter. The truth is, my stomach is doing backflips. 3 months ago, I wouldn't have dreamed of doing this. 3 months ago, I still believed I was really part of this family. "Ladies and gentlemen," the wedding coordinator announces, "we'll now hear from the bride's sister." My mother's head snaps toward me, her perfectly styled hair barely moving. "Piper, darling, I didn't know you prepared a speech." "Oh, I've been preparing this for weeks," I say, standing up. My black bridesmaid dress suddenly feels too tight, too restrictive. Like everything else in this family, it's just for show. As I walk to the center of the dance floor, I catch sight of my father Francis, busy typing on his phone. Typical. He's probably closing another real estate deal, too important to pay attention to his daughter. Well, not really his daughter. "Hey everyone," I start, my voice shakier than I'd like. "For those who don't know me, I'm Piper, Sullivan's sister." The word sister tastes bitter on my tongue. From the corner of my eye, I spot Terrell, Sullivan's college friend, watching me intently. We've only talked a few times during wedding preparations, but something in his eyes tells me he sees right through me. Growing up in the Warner family was interesting. I pause, letting the word hang in the air. We always looked perfect on the outside. The successful father, the devoted mother, the achieving son, and the artistic daughter. Picture-perfect Christmas cards every year. My Aunt Presley shifts uncomfortably in her seat. She knows what's coming. She's the only one who ever hinted that things weren't what they seemed. "Piper," my mother's warning tone carries across the room. "Perhaps we should move on to the dancing." "No, Mom, I don't think we will." My voice grows stronger. "Because 3 months ago I found something interesting while looking for my birth certificate for my passport renewal." The room goes quiet, even the clinking of glasses stops. "I found adoption papers." My hands are shaking, but my voice isn't. Papers that showed that the perfect daughter in those perfect Christmas cards wasn't actually theirs. Sullivan stands up so fast his chair falls backward. "Piper, what are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth, Sully, something our parents never did." I turn to face them directly. 28 years of lies. 28 years of pretending. Did you think I'd never find out? My father finally looks up from his phone. His face has gone pale. My mother's mascara is running now, but not from happy tears anymore. "I thought maybe there was a good reason," I continue, my voice cracking. "So I asked them, multiple times, but they just kept dismissing me, changing the subject, telling me I was being dramatic." Olive stands up, ready to come to my side, but I shake my head slightly. I need to do this alone. So I decided that if they wouldn't give me the truth, I'd take it for myself. And what better place than here, where everyone can see the perfect family for what it really is. "That's enough," my father's voice booms across the room. But for the first time in my life, I'm not backing down. "No, it's not enough. It's never been enough." I turn to address the shocked guests. "The truth is, I'm adopted. And my parents were so obsessed with maintaining their perfect image that they never told me. They let me believe a lie my entire life." The microphone slips from my trembling fingers, hitting the floor with a loud feedback screech. The sound perfectly matches the chaos erupting around me. Sullivan is yelling, my mother is crying, and my father is storming toward me. But as I stand there in the middle of it all, I feel strangely light, free. The truth is finally out, and there's no taking it back. As guests start whispering and phones come out to capture the drama, I catch Tyrell's eye again. He's not looking at me with shock or judgment, but with something else. Understanding? Admiration? I can't quite tell. What I do know is that this is just the beginning. The perfect family facade has cracked, and through those cracks, I can finally see a way out. 3 months earlier, I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor, surrounded by scattered papers from the old filing cabinet in Dad's study. My hands trembled as I held the document that would change everything. "Olive, I need you to come over, right now." My voice cracked as I spoke into the phone. "I'm in the middle of a date, Pipe," she said. "Please, I found something. I can't." The tears started falling onto the papers. 20 minutes later, Olive burst through my apartment door, still wearing her date night dress. "What's wrong? What happened?" I thrust the papers at her, unable to speak. She sat beside me on the floor, her eyes scanning the documents. "Holy shit," she whispered. "Are these adoption papers from when I was 6 months old?" I wiped my eyes with my sleeve. "They never told me, Olive, not once in 28 years. Olive wrapped her arms around me. Maybe they were waiting for the right time? The right time? I pulled away. I'm 28. I've graduated college, started a career, dated seriously. When exactly was the right time? Have you talked to them about it? I shook my head. I found these 2 hours ago. I was just looking for my birth certificate for that stupid passport renewal. You need to confront them, Olive said, sorting through the papers. Look, there's more here. Medical records, court documents. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Family dinner tomorrow night. Sullivan and Jessica are announcing their engagement. Wear something nice. I laughed bitterly. Perfect timing. Another family celebration. Are you going to say something at dinner? I don't know. I stood up and paced the room. How do you even start that conversation? Pass the potatoes, and by the way, why did you lie about adopting me? The next evening, I sat at my parents' dining room table, pushing food around my plate while Sullivan and Jessica shared their engagement story. Mom was beaming. Dad was actually paying attention for once, and I felt like I was watching a play where everyone knew their lines except me. Piper, you're quiet tonight, Mom said, reaching for the wine bottle. Everything okay at work? I set down my fork. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Of course, darling. Why did you never tell me I was adopted? The clatter of Sullivan's fork hitting his plate echoed through the sudden silence. Mom's hand froze mid-pour, red wine dripping onto the white tablecloth. What are you talking about? Dad's voice was sharp. I found the papers yesterday in your study. I pulled out the folded documents from my purse. Were you ever going to tell me? Mom's face went pale. Piper, this isn't the time. When is the time? I slammed my hand on the table. When I'm 30, 40, when I have kids of my own? You're being dramatic, Dad said, standing up. Jessica, Sullivan, I apologize for this disruption. Dramatic? I stood too, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You've lied to me my entire life. We protected you, Mom said, her voice trembling. We gave you everything. Except the truth. Sullivan cleared his throat. Maybe we should stay out of this, I snapped. Did you know? His silence was answer enough. Great. So everyone knew except me. I grabbed my purse. Thanks for dinner. Piper, wait, Mom called after me. Let's discuss this rationally. I turned at the door. Rationally? Like how you rationally decided to hide this from me for almost 3 decades? As I drove home, my phone kept buzzing with messages. I ignored them all except Olive's. How did it go? Exactly as expected. Denial, deflection, and you're being dramatic. Come over, I have wine and ice cream. At Olive's apartment, curled up on her couch, I finally let myself break down completely. There's something else, I said, wiping my eyes. I overheard Mom on the phone as I was leaving. She was talking to Aunt Presley, saying something about she can't know everything, and some secrets need to stay buried. Olive sat up straighter. What do you think that means? I don't know. I took another spoonful of ice cream. But I'm going to find out. And you know what? Sullivan's wedding would be the perfect time to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of family we really are. Piper, Olive's voice held a warning note. Don't try to talk me out of it. They've had 28 years to tell me the truth. Now they can have their truth served cold, just like this ice cream. As I said the words, I felt something harden inside me. The hurt was still there, but now it had an edge to it. A purpose. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Hey, it's Tyrell. Sullivan gave me your number. Want to grab coffee? Sounds like you could use someone to talk to. I stared at the message, wondering if maybe the universe was finally throwing me a lifeline. The bridal shower was exactly as insufferable as I'd expected. Mom had rented out the garden room at the country club, and everything was draped in blush pink and cream. I sat in the corner, nursing my third mimosa, watching Mom play perfect hostess. Piper, darling, she called across the room. Come help Jessica open her gifts. I'm good here, thanks. I raised my glass in a mock toast. Aunt Presley slid into the chair next to me. You look about as thrilled to be here as I am. At least you're not wearing this ridiculous bridesmaid dress. I tugged at the itchy fabric. Did you know? About what? But her eyes didn't quite meet mine. About me, about the adoption. Presley's fingers tightened around her wine glass. Piper, there are things... Ladies! Mom's voice cut through our conversation. We're about to play bridal bingo. I stood up abruptly. I need some air. In the hallway, I pulled out my phone and texted Tyrell. Save me, I'm dying of pink overload. His response came quickly. Meeting wrapped early. Want to escape? 20 minutes later, I was sliding into the passenger seat of his car, ignoring the flood of texts from Mom. You're my hero, I said, kicking off my heels. Rough day? Tyrell pulled out of the parking lot. Just the usual family fun, Mom pretending everything's fine, Jessica being the perfect bride-to-be, and me drinking mimosas to cope. He glanced at me. Have you talked to Sullivan since I confronted them about the adoption? He's called twice, left messages about working things out as a family. I mimicked my brother's condescending tone. But he knew Tyrell. He knew all along. We ended up at a small coffee shop downtown, far from the country club's manufactured perfection. So what's your plan? Tyrell asked, stirring his coffee. Besides drinking all the mimosas at the wedding. I'm going to tell everyone the truth, during the reception. He set down his spoon. Are you sure that's what you want? What else can I do? They won't talk to me about it. Mom changes the subject. Dad buries himself in work. And Sullivan... I trailed off, remembering our last conversation. Maybe there's more to the story? That's what Aunt Presley started to say before Mom interrupted. I leaned forward. Actually, I've been meaning to ask you something. You've known Sullivan since college. Did he ever mention... Tyrell shook his head. Never. But Piper, if you go through with this at the wedding, there's no going back. I know. But I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of being the only one who doesn't know my own story. My phone buzzed again. Mom. Where are you? Jessica is about to open your gift. I should go back, I sighed. Can't have people talking about the absent bridesmaid? Let them talk, Tyrell said, but he was already reaching for his keys. Back at the country club, I slipped into the garden room just as Jessica was opening my gift, a crystal vase I'd barely bothered to wrap. Oh, it's lovely, Jessica exclaimed with practiced enthusiasm. Piper, where were you? Mom hissed as I passed her. Getting coffee with Tyrell. Her eyes narrowed. Sullivan's friend? I don't think that's appropriate, given the circumstances. The circumstances being that I found out my whole life is a lie? Lower your voice, she snapped. This is Jessica's day. It's always someone else's day, isn't it, Mom? When does it get to be my day? When do I get the truth? Before she could answer, Aunt Presley appeared between us. Yara, they need you in the kitchen. Something about the cake. Mom hurried off, but Presley caught my arm before I could escape. Meet me tomorrow, she whispered. The diner on Oak Street, 9 a.m. There are things you should know. What things? But she was already walking away, leaving me with more questions than answers. My phone buzzed one last time. Tyrell. For what it's worth, I think you're braver than any of them. I looked around the room at my family, Mom directing the catering staff, Jessica surrounded by expensive gifts, the other bridesmaids giggling over wedding details. Everything perfectly orchestrated, perfectly false. 2 months until the wedding. 2 months to uncover whatever secrets Aunt Presley was hiding. 2 months to prepare for the moment I'd tear down this carefully constructed facade. I caught my reflection in one of the room's many mirrors. For the first time in weeks, I didn't see confusion or hurt in my eyes. I saw determination. Tomorrow at the diner, I'd start getting answers. And this time, no one would interrupt. I arrived at the diner 20 minutes early, but Aunt Presley was already there, stirring sugar into her coffee with shaking hands. The morning light caught the silver in her hair, making her look older than I'd ever noticed before. "You came," she said as I slid into the booth. "You said there were things I should know." The waitress appeared with a coffee pot. I nodded, and she filled my cup. "Before I tell you anything," Presley said, "you need to understand that your parents thought they were protecting you." "From what?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "From this." I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated 28 years ago. "Dear Yara and Francis," I read aloud. "I know this is an impossible situation, but please take care of my baby girl. She deserves better than what I can give her. All I ask is that you never tell her about me. She can't know about the darkness she came from. Love, Marie." My hands started shaking. "Marie, my birth mother?" Presley nodded. "Your parents weren't just random adoptive parents, Piper. Marie she was my best friend." The bell above the diner door chimed. I looked up to see Tyrell walking in, and my heart skipped. He spotted us and started to turn away, but I waved him over. "Is this a bad time?" he asked. "No," I said quickly. "Stay. Please." Presley waited until Tyrell was seated beside me before continuing. "Marie was brilliant, but troubled. She struggled with addiction, with abusive relationships. When she found out she was pregnant with you, she knew she couldn't keep you safe. So she gave me to her best friend's brother?" I looked at Presley. "Dad is your brother." "Yes." "Marie knew you'd be safe with them. They had money, stability, everything she couldn't provide. But why keep it a secret? Why not tell me when I was old enough to understand?" Presley's eyes filled with tears. "Because Marie made them promise, and because she's still alive, Piper. She's in a long-term care facility. She overdosed when you were 2 years old. The damage, she never fully recovered." The diner suddenly felt too small, too hot. Tyrell's hand found mine under the table. "Where?" My voice cracked. "Where is she?" "Sunset Grove Care Center, about an hour from here." Presley pulled out another piece of paper. "This is her room number, but Piper, she's not really there anymore, not mentally." I stood up so fast my coffee cup rattled. "I need some air." Outside, I leaned against the brick wall, breathing hard. Tyrell followed me out. "You okay?" "My birth mother is alive. She's been alive this whole time, less than an hour away." I turned to face him. Why didn't they tell me? Even if she made them promise, I had a right to know. "Maybe they thought they were sparing you pain." "By lying? By letting me believe I was their biological daughter?" I pushed off from the wall. "I'm going to see her." "Now?" "Right now. Are you coming?" He didn't hesitate. "Of course." Back inside, Presley was still sitting in the booth, clutching her coffee cup. "I'm going to see her," I announced. "Piper, wait. No more waiting. No more secrets." I grabbed the paper with the room number. "You can either tell Mom and Dad, or I will, but I'm done being kept in the dark." In Tyrell's car, I finally let myself cry. He drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other holding mine. My phone started ringing. Mom's face flashed on the screen. "Presley told them," I said, declining the call. "What are you going to do when you get there?" "I don't know, but I need to see her. I need to see where I came from." The phone rang again. This time it was Sullivan. "Little sister, what the hell are you doing?" "Don't call me that," I snapped. "You lost that right when I found out you've been lying to me my entire life." "Mom and Dad are freaking out." They're worried you'll do something stupid. Like what? Tell the truth? Because that's exactly what I'm planning to do at your wedding. Piper, please. I hung up and turned off my phone. They're all so worried about their perfect image, I said to Tyrell. Nobody's worried about what this is doing to me. I am, he said quietly. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing but sincerity in his eyes. The care center's sign appeared ahead of us. My heart started racing. Ready? Tyrell asked. No, I admitted, but I'm going in anyway. 28 years of lies were about to end. Whatever I found inside that building, at least it would be the truth. Sunset Grove Care Center smelled like disinfectant and sadness. A nurse led us down a pale green hallway, her shoes squeaking against the linoleum floor. Room 214, she said, stopping at a door decorated with faded paper flowers. Just don't expect too much interaction. Marie hasn't spoken in years. My hand trembled on the doorknob. Tyrell squeezed my shoulder. Want me to wait out here? I shook my head. Stay, please. The room was small but bright, with sunlight streaming through a large window. And there, in a wheelchair by the window, sat my birth mother. Her gray-streaked hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her vacant eyes stared at something only she could see. Marie? My voice came out as a whisper. I'm Piper. No response, not even a flicker of recognition. Your daughter. The nurse touched my arm gently. She's been like this since the overdose. The doctors say her brain was deprived of oxygen for too long. I moved closer, studying her face for any trace of myself. We had the same nose, I realized, the same high cheekbones. Can I reached for her hand. Of course, the nurse said. I'll give you some time. Marie's hand was warm but limp in mine. I sank into the chair beside her wheelchair while Tyrell leaned against the wall, a silent guardian. I found out about you, I said. About the adoption. They never told me, but I found the papers. Tears started falling. I wish you could tell me why. Why you made them promise to keep it secret. The door burst open. Mom stood there, breathless, with Dad right behind her. Piper, stop this right now, Dad commanded. I didn't let go of Marie's hand. Stop what? Finally meeting my real mother? We are your real parents, Mom said, stepping into the room. We raised you. We loved you. You lied to me. My voice rose, and Marie's hand twitched in mine. My entire life has been a lie, and I had to find out by accident. Keep your voice down, Dad hissed. This is a care facility. Oh, right. We wouldn't want to make a scene. That's what this is all about, isn't it? Keeping up appearances? Tyrell pushed off from the wall. Maybe we should take this outside. No, I said firmly. I'm staying with my mother. Piper, Mom's voice cracked. Please try to understand. We wanted to protect you. From what? From knowing that my birth mother loved me enough to give me up? From knowing that she's been here all this time, alive? From this, Dad gestured at Marie. From seeing her like this. From knowing that addiction destroyed her. That wasn't your choice to make. Marie's hand suddenly gripped mine, hard. Her eyes were still unfocused, but her fingers held on like she was drowning. She's responding to you, the nurse said from the doorway. That's unusual. Mom stepped forward, reaching for me, but I pulled away. Don't. I turned back to Marie. I'm getting married in 2 weeks, I told her. Well, not me, my brother, the son they actually gave birth to. I'm supposed to stand there and pretend we're one big happy family. Piper, enough, Dad warned. No, it's not enough. It will never be enough until everyone knows the truth. I stood up, carefully releasing Marie's hand. And they will know. At the wedding, everyone will know exactly what kind of family we really are. You wouldn't dare, Mom whispered. Watch me. I turned to leave, but Tyrell caught my arm. Piper, look. Marie was moving her lips, no sound coming out, but her eyes were fixed on me for the first time. What is she saying? I asked the nurse. She moved closer, watching Marie's lips. I think she's saying sorry. The word hit me like a physical blow. All these years, all these lies, and the only person who apologized was the one who couldn't even speak. "I'll be back," I promised Marie, with or without their permission. In the hallway, Mom tried one last time. "Please don't do this to Sullivan, to us." "Do what? Tell the truth? Someone has to." I walked away, Tyrell beside me, leaving my parents standing in that sterile hallway with their perfect family facade crumbling around them. In the car, I finally turned my phone back on. Dozens of messages from Sullivan, from Jessica, from family friends. The latest was from Olive. "Your mom just called me crying. What happened?" "The truth happened," I texted back, "and in 2 weeks everyone else will know it too." Tyrell started the car. "Where to?" I looked back at the care center, at the window I knew was Marie's. Somewhere I can practice my wedding speech. The time for secrets was over. The truth was all I had left, and I was going to wield it like a weapon. The wedding reception was in full swing when I finally stood up, champagne glass in one hand, microphone in the other. The events of my revelation from earlier still hung heavy in the air, but I wasn't done, not by a long shot. "I'd like to make another toast," I announced. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. Mom half rose from her seat, but Dad pulled her back down. "Piper, please," Sullivan begged from the head table. "Haven't you done enough?" "Actually, no." I moved to the center of the dance floor. "You see, after I discovered I was adopted, I did some digging, and what I found was so much worse than just a hidden adoption." Olive stood up. "Piper, maybe we should—" "My birth mother is alive," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "She's in a care facility less than an hour from here. She's been there for 26 years, ever since an overdose left her brain damaged. And everyone knew, everyone except me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones came out recording the drama unfolding. "But here's the best part." I turned to face my parents directly. "She was Aunt Presley's best friend. This wasn't some random adoption. You knew her, you knew exactly who she was, and you kept her existence from me my entire life." "That's enough," Dad's voice boomed across the room. "No, it's not, because guess what I found yesterday when I went to see her?" I pulled a folded paper from my dress. "The nurses gave me access to her personal effects, and I found this." Mom's face went white. "Piper, don't—" "It's a letter, written right before her overdose." My hands shook as I unfolded it. "Dear Yara and Francis, I know you think keeping Piper from me is the right thing to do, but she's my daughter. She deserves to know her mother, even with all my flaws. Please don't cut me out of her life completely." The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Even the wedding photographers had stopped clicking their cameras. "She wrote this 2 days before she overdosed," I said, my voice cracking. 2 days before the incident that left her unable to speak, to think clearly, to tell me herself who she was. And you knew, you all knew. Jessica was crying now, clutching Sullivan's arm. He just stared at me, shock written across his face. "So here's to family secrets," I raised my glass. "Here's to lies told in the name of protection. Here's to the perfect family image that meant more than the truth." I tried to stop her. Aunt Presley's voice cut through the tension. She stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Marie was my best friend, and I tried to convince them to tell you, but they were so afraid." "Afraid of what?" I demanded. "Afraid I'd find out my birth mother was an addict? Afraid it would ruin your country club reputation?" "We were afraid you'd end up like her," Mom shouted, finally breaking. "We were afraid you'd go looking for her, try to help her, and get pulled into that world. That wasn't your choice to make." Tyrell appeared at my side, gently taking the microphone. "Maybe we should take a break." "No." I pulled away from him. "Everyone needs to hear this. Everyone needs to know that the perfect Warner family is built on lies, that they let a woman waste away in a care facility, alone, while keeping her daughter in the dark. You want the truth?" Dad stood up, his face red with anger. "The truth is we gave you everything. A good home, education, opportunities. Everything Marie couldn't provide. Except honesty." I threw my champagne glass. It shattered against the wall, sending guests scrambling. except the basic dignity of knowing who I really am. Piper, Terrell's voice was soft but firm, you've made your point. I looked around the room. Some guests were filming on their phones, others were whispering behind their hands. Sullivan had his head in his hands while Jessica sobbed quietly beside him. You're right, I said, suddenly feeling drained. I have made my point, and now everyone knows exactly what kind of family we are. I turned to leave, but Mom's voice stopped me. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. I turned back one last time. Don't worry, Mom. I wouldn't want to tarnish your perfect family image any more than I already have. Terrell followed me out into the night air. Behind us, I could hear the chaos erupting in the reception hall. Feel better? He asked. No, I admitted. But at least now everyone knows the truth. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I was at the wedding. I knew Marie. There's more to the story than what you know. Meet me tomorrow? I showed Tyrell the message. Are you going to go? I looked back at the reception hall, at the family I thought I knew, at the lies finally exposed to the light. Yes, I said. I need to know everything. The morning after the wedding, I sat in a quiet corner of a local cafe, waiting for the mysterious texter. Tyrell insisted on coming with me, sitting at a nearby table pretending to work on his laptop. A woman in her 50s approached my table. Piper? Yes? I'm Rachel. I was Marie's nurse, before the overdose. My heart skipped. Please, sit. Rachel settled across from me, placing an old photo album on the table. I saw your speech last night. I was catering the wedding. You knew my birth mother? I was there the night she overdosed. Rachel's fingers traced the album's worn cover. But there's something you need to know. It wasn't an accident. The cafe suddenly felt too quiet, too still. What do you mean? Marie was doing better. She'd been clean for months. She was fighting for you, trying to prove she could be in your life. Rachel opened the album. Look. The first photo showed a younger version of the woman I'd seen in the care facility. Marie was smiling, holding a baby, holding me. Your parents had temporary custody while Marie went through rehab. She was making progress following all the court requirements. Rachel turned the page. Then one night, she called me in a panic, said she'd found something that your parents were planning to take you away permanently. Terrell had abandoned his pretense of working and moved closer. The next day, they found her unconscious in her apartment. Everyone assumed she'd relapsed, but Rachel pulled out an envelope. She left this with me the night before, made me promise to keep it safe. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter and what looked like legal documents. Dear Rachel, I read aloud. If anything happens to me, keep these safe. Francis and Yara are trying to declare me an unfit mother. They've falsified documents about my recovery. They're going to take my baby forever. I have proof, but they know I know. I'm scared. If something happens to me, make sure Piper learns the truth someday. That's impossible, I whispered. They wouldn't. The next morning she was found with enough heroin in her system to kill 3 people. Marie never used heroin. She was afraid of needles. Tyrell's hand found mine under the table. Are you saying... I couldn't finish the sentence. I'm saying your parents wanted you badly enough to do whatever it took. Rachel's voice was gentle. The police investigated briefly, but Francis had connections. The case was closed as an accidental overdose. Does Aunt Presley know? She suspected, I think, but she could never prove anything. My phone buzzed. Sullivan. Mom's in the hospital. Anxiety attack after your stunt last night. Hope you're happy. I ignored it, focusing on the documents Rachel had brought. Court papers, medical records, letters between my parents' lawyer and the adoption agency. They orchestrated the whole thing, I said numbly. They made sure she'd never be able to claim me. Marie loved you, Piper. She fought for you until she couldn't fight anymore. Terrell spoke up. Have you shown these documents to anyone else? Rachel shook her head. I was afraid. Francis is a powerful man. Not powerful enough to hide from this. I gathered the documents. Not anymore. My phone buzzed again. Aunt Presley. We need to talk. There's something you should know about the night Marie overdosed. I have to go, I told Rachel. But thank you for keeping these safe, for telling me the truth. Outside, Tyrell grabbed my arm. What are you going to do? First, I'm going to meet Presley. Then I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people my parents really are. Piper, think about this. If what Rachel said is true, your parents might have been involved in my birth mother's attempted murder? Yeah, I got that. I pulled out my phone and dialed Olive's number. Hey, remember that investigative reporter you dated last year? Is he still interested in family scandal stories? Piper, slow down. What's happening? The truth, Olive. The whole truth is finally coming out. Another text from Sullivan. Mom's asking for you. Please come to the hospital. I showed Tyrell the message. Are you going to go? Yes, I said, hailing a cab. But not to make peace. I'm going to look them in the eyes and ask them if they really tried to kill my birth mother. Tyrell climbed in beside me. I'm coming with you. As the cab pulled away, I looked at the photo of Marie holding me as a baby. Her smile was bright, hopeful. She had no idea what was coming. I'm going to make this right, I whispered to the photo. I promise. My phone buzzed one last time. An unknown number. Be careful who you trust. Some secrets are buried deep for a reason. The hospital loomed ahead, and with it, the final confrontation I never expected. It was time to learn just how far my parents had gone to create their perfect family. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors. Mom lay in bed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Dad sat beside her, and Aunt Presley stood by the window. Before anyone says anything, I announced, holding up the documents, I know what really happened to Marie. Dad's face went pale. Whatever you think you know. I know you falsified documents. I know you made sure she'd never get custody, and I know about the heroin. Mom started crying. We did it for you. No, my voice was steel. You did it for yourselves. You wanted the perfect family, and Marie was in your way. You don't understand, Dad stood up. She was unstable, dangerous. She was getting better. I slammed the documents down. She was fighting for me, and you couldn't stand it. Tell her, Presley said suddenly. Tell her the truth, Francis, or I will. Dad sank back into his chair. We didn't mean for her to die. What did you do? My heart was pounding. We paid someone, Mom whispered, to plant the drugs, to make it look like a relapse. We just wanted her to fail the custody hearing. But something went wrong, Presley continued. The person we hired, he used too much. By the time they found her, we never meant, Dad's voice cracked. We just wanted you to be ours. The truth hit me like a physical blow. Tyrell steadied me as I swayed. You tried to kill my mother. No, Mom reached for me. We just wanted to discredit her. We didn't know. I've already called the police, I said quietly. They're on their way, and I've sent copies of everything to every major news outlet in the state. Dad lunged for his phone, but Tyrell blocked him. It's done, I continued. Your perfect family image is over, and Marie finally gets justice. You'll destroy this family, Mom sobbed. You destroyed it 28 years ago when you decided your reputation was worth more than a woman's life. The door opened. 2 police officers entered, followed by a detective. Francis and Yara? The detective asked. We need to ask you some questions about the night of March 15th, 28 years ago. As they led my parents away, Presley touched my arm. I should have spoken up sooner. I was a coward. Yes, you were. I pulled away from her. But at least you finally told the truth. Outside the hospital, reporters were already gathering. The story was breaking. Prominent family's dark secret, attempted murder and cover-up. What now? Tyrell asked. Now I go see Marie. She deserves to know her truth is finally being heard. At Sunset Grove, Marie was sitting by the window as always. But this time, when I took her hand, her eyes met mine. It's over, I told her. They can't hurt you anymore. They can't hurt us anymore. Her fingers tightened around mine, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman from the photos, strong, determined, fighting for her daughter. I'm going to visit you every week, I promised. We have 28 years to make up for. My phone buzzed. Olive. Just saw the news. You okay? No, I texted back, but I will be. Sullivan called next. The police are questioning Jessica's family about canceling the wedding. This is a nightmare. The nightmare was living a lie our entire lives, I replied and hung up. Terrell wrapped his arms around me as we left the care facility. You did it. You found your truth. Our truth, I corrected, looking back at Marie's window. Hers and mine. The evening news was already running the story. My parents' mugshots, Marie's old photos, the documents proving their conspiracy. The perfect family facade had finally shattered completely. But as I watched the sun set over the care facility, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. The truth had cost me the family I thought I had, but it had given me something more valuable, the family I was meant to have all along. Want to get coffee? Tyrell asked. Actually, I smiled, taking his hand. I want to tell my mother about my day. We walked back into the care facility, leaving behind the cameras, the reporters, and the wreckage of carefully constructed lies. Ahead of me was something better than perfection, reality, with all its messy, beautiful truth. Marie was waiting, and this time, when I started talking, I swore I saw her smile.